And we're live. I'm on a little bit early, folks. Hello. Get a wee bit of background light on there. How's that? Thank you very much for joining me. We're just on a little bit early to make sure everything's working okay. I've got sound, I've got a picture. So if anybody's there, we'll be due to be online in a minute. And we'll be getting on with our next chapter of the book club, just getting organized. This is a really interesting chapter today. Chapter 45. So let's just set out our stall. That I've color coded everything. I've missed a few things, but we'll have to just push on with it. So let's see, just coming up to 9 o'clock. So if anyone's out there, say hello. And as I said, we had a good wee chat last night. Actually popped on for a bit of crack, as they say here, where we had a bit of a natter about Cixin Liu and his remembrance of Earth's Past trilogy. Excuse me, a very enjoyable wee chat last night with everybody. We had somebody, I think it was Connor Quinn in particular, said something that I just thought was fantastic. Was that Cixin Liu had weaponized Flatland. There's Bojack saying hi all. Hi Bojack, thanks for joining us. We've hit 9 o'clock, so hopefully we'll get a few people coming in now and we'll get the show started. So I'll just say hello everybody, welcome to Doc Sloan's Science Fiction Station here at the Doghouse on YouTube. We're doing chapter 45 of Frank Herbert's magnum opus, Dune, or Dune, if you like. I'm Northern Irish, and that's how I'll say it today. So, hi, there's Lord Trunk. I've actually got something really interesting today because I'm going to point something out from this. We were having a chat about the King of Elfland's daughter. It's going to be relevant to something in this chapter today. The whole sort of, we've always wondered about is will my book survive me reading this entire, and it's still in one piece, but it's splitting. I'm sad to say, but it's still in one piece. I consider a book lost when pages fall out of it. If you see what I mean, when the stitching's gone. So we'll just get my wee, let's see, paperweights here. And we'll begin with the epigraph. Now, we're basically 3 weeks later from the previous chapter. But let's take a look at it here. It's a little bit prophetic in tone, I think. It has religious language in it. Let's see. So epigraph 45. And it came to pass in the 3rd year of the Desert War that Paul Muad'Dib lay alone in the cave of birds beneath the kiswa hangings of an inner cell. And he lay as one dead, caught up in the revelation of the water of life, his being translated beyond the boundaries of time by the poison that gives life. This was the prophecy made true, that the Lisan al-Gaib might be both dead and alive. From, as usual, the collected Legends of Arrakis, and this is, of course, by Princess Irulan. So there we go. Based on this, I think we can figure out a few things, by the way, that Paul's probably 18 at this point. And I would say Paul being both dead and alive here, in the sense that Paul taking this, excuse me, the water of life, in the sense this is his catabasis, it's his journey to the underworld, that right, this thing where he will, the reward for which I suppose is that he will receive what we would like to call the pearl of great wisdom. There's Cynthia saying hello, Doc. Hi Cynthia, thanks very much for joining us. So I'm just going to adjust my camera a wee bit, I think. Let me just see. Not go too much, cause a bit of a disaster. Try to get myself a bit in the middle of the screen. There we go, that'll do, I think. We're still getting this place organized a wee bit. But there we go. So, right, let's get cracking. As always, folks, if anybody's got any comments or questions about this, before we get going, it's time to point something out here. I suppose we'll get to it in a wee second or two, but this chapter begins with a deceit. And this deceit is relevant to the story of the Atreides from the Trojan War. And this deceit is going to have massive consequences. And we'll talk about it, I suppose, when we get to the admission of it. But essentially what we have here is Chani, I would suggest, being deceived in a way like Iphigenia. And of course, it's not Chani that's going to be sacrificed, is it? But, and in particular, this is a chapter where Chani comes into her own. And something else that just before we do get started, somebody the last time was chatting about how characters move through different archetypes. And essentially, if we look back over the last few chapters, what we've got is Gurney being a fool, Jessica being a bit of a fool, and now it's Paul's turn to be the fool, if you see what I mean. There's Telios, there's Babs. Evening, Doc. Howdy, y'all, says Telios. How you doing, Babs? Thank you very much for joining us. I hope you're feeling a lot better. Pardon me. So we'll have a little chat about it, but this is to do with this in particular. What I'm thinking on is the sacrifice at Aulis, which is the event that begins the Trojan War. The Trojan War is a go-go, but it's the event that allows the Greeks, if you like, to set sail. They're becalmed, excuse me, by the gods at the Isle of Aulis, and ultimately it's the sacrifice of Iphigenia and all of the things that relate to that myth. That I suppose that launched the Trojan War, really, per se. And the deceit involves Achilles and her father, etc., etc. But basically, what happens in that myth, before we get into this, is that Iphigenia is brought to Aulis under the pretense that she will be married to Achilles. So, and of course, this is a lie. She's sacrificed. Depending on which version of the myth you believe, she either is actually murdered, or else the goddess Artemis replaces her with a sacred deer, which is instead sacrificed. So there we go. We'll have a wee chat about it when we get to it. And as I said, I think this will be much more apparent when we hit the next chapter, and ultimately the fate of Leto II, I suppose. So let's get cracking, folks. So our location here is, of course, the Cave of Birds, and we start off with a point of view from Chani, and we're told that she's come up out of the Habanya basin in the pre-dawn darkness, hearing the thopter that had brought her from the south go whirring off to a hiding place in the vastness. And immediately that makes us contrast. Think about a contrast of what happened in the previous chapter, that Jessica was not allowed to come from the south in a thopter, because Paul's reasoning is that we're keeping these for the day of maximum effort. And there's two things that Paul has done here that Jessica is going to undo, and the consequences of those are really bad. And in one sense, the result of that will be that Jessica gets to keep her child, but Chani will lose hers. So I'll just put contrast to Jessica in the previous chapter here. So around her escort kept its distance, fanning out into the rocks of the ridge to probe for dangers, giving the mate of Muad'Dib, the mother of his firstborn, the thing she had requested, a moment to walk alone. So Chani's thoughts here: why did he summon me? He told me before that I must remain in the south with Leto and Alia. And we've just put here at this point that she believes that Paul has summoned her here. And this is the subterfuge by Jessica. And Paul wanted Chani with Leto and Alia in the south. We have to ask a question here. Why? And the terms here. Why did he summon me? He told me before that I must remain. Must is the term there. So it seems imperative that she stay there. And of course, Paul, as we'll find out, isn't kind of running the show here at the minute. This is Jessica's work. And we're going to see a really nice build of fear and tension, sense of urgency for Chani here. But she's getting a moment here before collecting herself, running through her thoughts. And I actually think this is a really good chapter for Chani. I think we'll also have a contrast between the Atreides people and Chani in terms of language. I think is quite interesting. And I think Chani's really impressive in this chapter. So we're told she gathered her robe, leaped lightly up across a barrier rock onto the climbing path, only the desert trained could recognize in the darkness. Pebbles slithered underfoot, and she danced across them without considering the nimbleness required. The sense of natural grace about Chani. We're always told that she's elfin-like, graceful, elf-like. Well, we'll get there today. It's going to be a fun one today. I think we've a very important chapter. And of course, we're heading to the climax, aren't we? Looking so forward to getting to the last big chapter. That's going to be epic. I have to say, I don't know how long that episode's going to be. There's Lord Crunk saying, yeah, the back and forth between Chani and Jessica is cool. It is. Yes, I really think that Chani's on top of things here. And I think Chani's particularly impressive here. And I do think it's good. There's a meeting of minds here with the two women. I think that, and a shift in the relationship. And I think again that will carry on a little bit from the previous chapter where we've had this sudden life-threatening moment for Jessica. Where she comes up with this, she gives this speech to Paul, do your thing, son, live for love, this kind of thing. And of course, we're clued in on what's happened here because of Paul's last sort of thoughts from the previous chapter. I will drown the Maker. We will see now whether I'm the Kwisatz Haderach who can survive the test that the Reverend Mothers have survived. So we're a bit clued in as to what's happened here. Whenever we get there, I suppose we know we have a bit of foresight into it. So the climb, we're told, was exhilarating, easing the fears that had fermented in her. There's a lot of nice writing in this chapter from Frank. There's a lot of, it's quite poetic in some ways. There's a lot of alliteration, consonants, accents, all of these kind of things. And I'm enjoying that sort of part of the writing here in this part of the book. And as we're heading towards our conclusion, the tension, the energy has to pick up. Excuse me. So the exhilaration eases her fears that had fermented in her. Why is this? We're told because one, her escort's silent withdrawal. So no one's telling her what's going on, which can only increase your anxiety. And the second thing here, and again, this contradiction to what we read the previous chapter, a precious thopter had been sent for her. She felt the inner leaping at the nearness of reunion with Paul Muad'Dib, her Usul. So slightly possessive pronouns here with Chani. We're told Paul's name might be a battle cry over all the land. Muad'Dib, Muad'Dib, Muad'Dib. But she knew a different man by a different name. The father of her son, the tender lover. And that's the interesting thing. I suppose we all know the myth. Chani knows, a man, a husband. That's the wrong word, isn't it? A partner, if you like, the father of her son, the tender lover. We have to be careful with that word husband in this book, don't we? So then we're told a great figure loomed out of the rocks above her, beckoning for speed. And this is Othium. And we're actually seeing a few of these guys here, by the way. Othium and who's the other guy? These key members of Paul's Fedakeen, they'll be quite important in the next book, I have to say. And Corba and Othium in particular, it's often sort of these are the key Fedakeen around Paul. What happens to them later in the next book will be quite interesting. So this great figure loomed out of the rocks above her, beckoning for speed. And Chani, we're told, quickened her pace. The dawn birds are already calling and lifting into the sky. So dawn's arriving, saying for all the Fremen to get underground, etc., into their caves. A dim spread of light grew across the eastern horizon. And here we go on some of Chani's thoughts. So the figure, this is on the figure above, it's not one of her own escort. And is it Othim, she wondered. She marked the familiarity of movement and manner. She came up to him, recognized in the glowing light the broad, flat features of the Fedakeen lieutenant. His hood open, mouth filter loosely fastened the way one did when venturing into the desert for only a moment. And I've just thought we can contrast that with the way we're talked about the other Fremen in the previous chapter, who's dressed as if he's been out into the desert for a little while and back. something like that, I think. So we're getting these sort of little repetitive patterns within this chapter. And let's see. I'll just put there, see the previous chapter. So Othim says, hurry, and it's a hiss. And so a lot of this chapter, by the way, if we're reading it, I tend to put in I put up arrows and down arrows, particularly when particularly the way almost the way characters are elevated, if you see what I mean, the way they speak either down or up. We've had an awful lot of that in the last couple of chapters. So hurry, hissed Othim, and he led her down into the secret crevice, into the hidden cave. It will be light soon, he whispered. We're told he held the door seal open for her. The Harkonnens have been making desperation patrols over some of this region. We dare not risk discovery now. And I've thought that was interesting, and I've just put next to that, this is caution, which is a Atreides trait. It's the Atreides trait that we're schooled in right from the very beginning of this book. There's Frank Red saying, evening all. Evening, Frank. Thanks very much for joining us. We're just working our way through the first bit of chapter 45. Again, anyone's got any wee comments or questions, fire away as I come up for air. So all this is very good to building little bits of tension for particularly, and you can imagine how Chani must feel here. So we're told, they emerge into a narrow side passage, which is the entrance to the Cave of Birds, and we can see the glow globes come alight. And Othim pressed past her, follow me, quickly now. So again, this urgency. So we're told they sped down the passage, through another valve door, another passage, through hangings into what had been the Sayadina's alcove in the days when this was an overlay rest cave. So, and essentially, I suppose, the Cave of Birds, in a way, has been repurposed at this point. We're told rugs and cushions covered the floor. We're getting a little setting here. Woven hangings, and the red figure of a hawk hid the rock walls. A low field desk, and it's a Holtzman field, I think, at one side, strewn with papers from which lift the aroma of their spice origin. And this is all set the stage for Jessica, and there's Jessica. The Reverend Mother, we're told, sat alone, directly opposite the entrance. She looked up with the inward stare. It's the first time we'll hear this mentioned. That made the uninitiated tremble. I'll put these are the mysteries of the religion, aren't they, I suppose. There's Carlos Crescelia saying, hey, Doc. Hey, Carlos, thank you very much for joining us. Cynthia is saying, another small Troy reference. Helen wove a tapestry of the war during her sojourn in Troy. Here is a woven hanging with the Atreides hawk. Very interesting, Cynthia. Tapestries. Woven hangings with the red figure. Yeah, and of course, if we know the Odyssey, Penelope, how one of the reasons how Penelope, or one of the methods that Penelope holds off the suitors, is that doesn't she sew a tapestry but undoes what she's sewn? She'd say that she'll choose a husband when she's completing it. Is it a mourning tapestry or something like that, if I remember correctly? Probably not these days of my old age. But yes, indeed. That's ultimately, isn't it? Penelope, one of Penelope's handmaidens betrays her to the suitors. There's a woman hanging with the Atreides. Yes, I mean, I think a lot of the main thing that we get from the Trojan War is, I suppose, is the fall of Arrakeen is very similar to the fall of Troy. But this chapter and the next one, I think it's quite. We'll have a wee natter about it when we get there. But those who know this stuff, I think it's kind of obvious. It's just we're playing with it. We're taking these ideas and putting it in. But the deceit to get Chani here. And of course, in the next chapter, I've pointed that Paul won't go to war until that moment happens, and he knows that Leto's dead. And that will be the consequence of this, of Jessica's actions here, which spare her son, will cause Chani to lose hers. And I think that's really interesting. I suppose we'll have a look in detail later, So the Reverend Mother sat alone. We're getting this setting up directly opposite the entrance. Probably prepped this, if you know what I mean. You get the sense that, whenever a Reverend Mother receives somebody, that it's pomp, circumstance, power, and all this kind of thing, and it's the inward stare that made the uninitiated tremble. Does not make Chani tremble. So Otheum, palms pressed together. I have brought Chani, bowed and retreated through the hangings. And Jessica's thoughts here. How do I tell Chani? What she actually says is, how's my grandson? So the language here from Jessica is formal. It's delayed, if you like. She's trying to delay what she's talking about. It's ritualistic, and it's also, pardon me, how would we put it? It's not warm in any way towards Chani. It would come across as quite cold, I think. And Chani's thoughts here, we get a lot of insight into this. Chani's thoughts here before she speaks, and she I think Chani's absolutely clued up in this, very clued up. And what I think it really shows is certainly nothing to do with Paul, but how much Jessica underestimates her. And I get the sense, as much as we know, for those of us who got through further into the later Dune books, there's the concept of the bit tongue-tied tonight, the wild Reverend Mothers, and I very much get the sense that Chani could be one of these, if you like. And we'll see why in a little bit. So Chani's thoughts are, so it's to be the ritual greeting, and her fears return. Something's not right here, and that's maybe a sense that normally there should be a bit more warmth here, because this is the mother of her grandson, for goodness sake. Where is Muad'Dib? Why isn't he here to greet me? So she's being direct. These are her thoughts. Sorry. So what she actually says is, he is healthy and happy, my mother. I left him with Alia in the care of Hera. So again, we're getting the thoughts, and then we're getting the speech. We can see the deception. Chani's playing the game here to see what's going on, but her real thoughts are, where is Muad'Dib? What's going on? Why isn't he here to greet me? And of course, she has been deceived. And we'll get there in a wee second. Jessica's thoughts are, my mother, yes, she has the right to call me that. In the formal greeting, she has given me a grandson. So backing up, Chani's response to her is, he's healthy and happy, my mother. I've just put next to this, snobbish, trying. My mother, yes, she has the right to call me that in the formal greeting. She has given me a grandson. So there's formalities within the language here. And as much, it's almost, they're both aware of the formalities. It's almost a little game of chess here. And I think Chani, by using the term "my mother," is trying to draw Jessica out of her formality. And I get that sense that she'll play the game, but she's trying to soften Jessica here, I think. And Jessica as well, I think, oh my God, yeah, she can. Yeah, she's the right to call me that. So I've just put the next bit, banter, prattle, if you like. Jessica, I hear a gift of cloth has been sent from Kwisatz Haderach. And Chani, yeah, it's a lovely cloth. I've put a wee note here. Let me just get to my pen here, and I have to turn a page. That's note number 13. Bear with me a wee second, folks. Yes, I hear a gift of cloth has been sent from Kwisatz. And I just went, okay, there's a word. Let's go have a look. And I found Coahuila, I think, which is a place in Mexico. But the word Coa is like a primitive hoe, I believe. Cohen math is also a tail. Cohen math, I think. I don't know. I couldn't find anything particularly definitive on that word. But I did find that the word koa, as if it's the first part of it, is a primitive hoe, as in a farming implement. But it's just a wee mention of these seats. And as always, if anybody's got anything more on that word, koa nua, or anybody has any idea of the etymology of it, or can add anything to it, I'd love to hear about it. There's always things in this book. So it's a lovely cloth. This is mindless banter, isn't it? It's prattle, it's small talk. And I just thought that was interesting because we had the little talk about prattle in the previous. And I've just written here at the top. Sorry. Funny, I always catch up with my thoughts, but I just got there at the top of the page. Prattle, see, previous chapter. So we're running with a number of similar things here, I suppose. So the response, does Alia send a message, says Jessica. No message, this is Chani, but the siege moves more smoothly now that the people are beginning to accept the miracle of her status. There we go. That's an interesting way of putting it. Her status standing, if you like. Would be status in Latin, wouldn't it? So Chani's thoughts again are coming through here. So why does she drag this out? So she wondered. Something was so urgent that they sent a thought before me that they wouldn't send for Jessica. That Paul wouldn't send for Jessica, his own mother. Now we drag through the formalities. And Jessica speaks, we must have some of the new cloth cut into garments for little Leto. And I just my immediate I've just written next to it, no, he's doomed. And it just reminded me of, do you know all those war films where the parachutist tells you he's going to save his silk of his parachute for his gal when he gets home and he's going to marry, and that's always the guy that gets killed. It just reminded me a little bit on that, you know. There we go. I'll just catch up. There's Tanya saying, could the death of Leto have been ordered by the sisterhood? Would they be aware of Leto at this point? I'm wondering. There's Ryan the Scar saying, hey Doc, hey guys, hi Ryan. Telios is saying, howdy Ryan. It could be, I suppose. I'm trying to think. I think we'll actually find out why the raid happens. I think it's on the Emperor's word, isn't it? That they understand that there's, and let's send some troops down there. I think it's all to do with why the Raban and so on won't head down to the south. I think we'll get to it in the next. Is it the last chapter? Possibly. But it is possible, I think. But and of course, yeah. I suppose it could be Telios, Babs. The question is, are the sisterhood aware of Alia? And that begs the question about other memory and simuflu and all of that kind of thing, you know. So why does she drag this out? Something so urgent that they sent a thopter for me. Now we drag through the formalities. Jessica, and again, Jessica says, we must have some of the new cloth cut into garments for little Leto. Sorry, just backing up there. So Chani says, whatever you wish, my mother. And she lowered her gaze. And I've written submissive. And then I've written falsely so. So she's assuming a slightly submissive position here to try and get this out of Jessica, I think. Is there news of battles? And she held her face expressionless that Jessica might not see the betrayal that this question was about Paul Muad'Dib. She's wanting, would you just tell me what's happened, you know? So we're told that new victories, Raban has sent cautious overtures about a truce. I wonder how that would go for him. His messengers have been returned without their water. Raban has even lightened the burdens of the people in some of the sinking villages, but he is too late. So he's trying to undo, you know, trying to be a bit nicer, if you like, but he's the beast Raban. That's what they call him for a reason. And I've got a little skull here on my notes for Raban's messengers. Don't shoot the messenger is one of those things. Gifts of earth and water. We know the Spartans. You know, but yes, no, the idea of killing a messenger is pretty bad, if you like it. It's an interesting thing that the Fremen kill the messengers of Raban here. Frank says, Jessica seems predisposed to distrust Chani in this chapter, but several times checks her attitude when she realizes Chani's care for Paul. Something of the generational shift of power here. Yes, and I think we're talking about archetypes there. There you go. You've that's right. I was just about to say it. You typed it, Frank. There you go. But perhaps also the triple goddess maiden mother crone, which I'm sure you've discussed there. Yes, indeed. Really, the mother and the maiden here, I think, it strikes me highly as the relation, a bit similar to the relationship between Demeter and Persephone here. They'd want to remove the wild DNA out of control from their breeding program. It's Chani's DNA that brings the God Emperor, isn't it? She's the mother of the God Emperor, not Jessica. And that's, I think, interesting, isn't it? Well, especially when we consider that the Bene Gesserit plot more interbreeding with the Harkonnen Atreides family, if you like. Carlos, sorry, just catching everybody's comments there. Carlos says the Bene Gesserit did fear the wild Fremen genes and probably had the power to order his death, but would they risk losing the Atreides genes they needed? And of course, there is an attempt in the book to maintain the bloodlines, isn't there? That's where we look at Lady Fenring, and her purpose, if you like, on GD Prime is to secure one of those bloodlines. Yeah, the idea of inbreeding the Harkonnens and the Atreides, it's an interesting one. It makes you think a bit, doesn't it? The DNA mix produced the God Emperor. They're wary of Chani's wild DNA. Yeah. I really like Chani in this chapter. And it's interesting when you see what she brings to the party here, because she is very much just something in the background, really, isn't she? She really does come into her own in this chapter. And I don't want to call her a minor character because she's not. But in relation to the book, she probably is, to be honest with you. We'll see a lot more of her later. In particular, in Dune Messiah. But it's one of those things that it's the same as Alia. I think Alia is probably, we're going to see Alia, and I absolutely love Alia, but what we see of her in the book is very, very little, to the point where Alia is my favorite character in Dune, believe it or not. She's not my favorite character over the overall Dune series, but her appearance in Dune, the idea of this child is fascinating. And I do like Alia when she turns up, because she's vicious. I think she's brilliant. And it is that little bit of writing here. But whenever we do get to see, this is it. We're seeing the women really in detail here, aren't we? And as much as we focused a lot, we do see a lot of Jessica and her thoughts. Up to this point, we've probably seen more of Margot Fenring, I think, than possibly Chani and Alia. Just within the book itself, in action in terms of speech. But this is great. And I think there's a real economy of language with Chani. There's no bullshit with her, if you excuse the term. She's trying to get to the point here, and Jessica's not really helping her. But she's being patient, and she's kind of trying to sort of take on a lesser role, if you like, to let Jessica. She's giving Jessica power here, if you like. Or a little bit more. Jessica says, sorry, let's see. But he's too late. Jessica says, the people know he does it out of fear of us. And Chani replies, thus it goes, as Muad'Dib said. And Chani stared at Jessica, trying to keep her fears to herself. And again, we know that we've got a little bit of insight, the fear here. What's wrong? Because we know that we kind of know what Paul's up to, but has it gone wrong? What, etc. We're starting to get a little bit, it's not just quite as straightforward as we kind of thought. He'll take the water life, bring Superman, off he goes. But it's not the case. Chani's thoughts are, again, it's the same with the use of the word mother earlier, and she's dropped Muad'Dib in here. I have spoken his name, but she has not responded. One cannot see the emotion in that glazed stone she calls a face, but she is too frozen. Why is she so still? What has happened to my Usul? And she's incredibly insightful here, isn't she? She, as much as Jessica's putting up a kind of a wall, if you like, a stone face is the way Chani frozen, emotionless. Chani's not buying it at all, and that shows that she's really perceptive here, I think. But her fears are starting to build, and she wants them answered, I think. Jessica's response here, I suppose, is whimsy almost. I wish we were in the south. The oases were so beautiful when we left. Do you not long for the day when the whole land may blossom thus? You know, and really, if we're going with this, the core aspect of what needs to be said is that you're the person who's basically your husband is in a coma. That's what needs to be said here. But instead, I wish we were in the south. And again, it cuts back to the previous chapter with Jessica, her desires for a softer, quieter life. And it was more about being at court, wasn't it? About being in the imperial court and the dangers there. It's changed a little bit. It's just rather than that, I wish I was on Caladan. I wish I was in the comfort of the imperial court. I wish I was in the south where the oases are, where they're so beautiful when we left. And maybe that's a slight as was it Frank saying that there's little shifts in her attitude here, and I think that might be one of them. There's Jules saying, my favorite chapter, she goes left because of this. It's one of my favorite chapters in the book. I think probably I'd argue maybe the next one is close to being one of mine, I think. But this little cluster of chapters at the end of the book are all quite good. I think they're well written, and the way that Frank's bringing these the conclusions to some of the threads of the plots, that we're tidying up stuff and we're getting ready to bring all the Atreides together for that moment of maximum effort. But this is just whimsy, isn't it? Chani, the land is beautiful, true, but there's much grief in it. So the key words that Chani's using here, and it started making me think a bit about general semantics and stuff, which is a big part of Dune. Alfred Korzybski's general semantics, etc. The way that Chani's dropping words here, language, playing with language is a good part of Dune, I suppose, and the author is, of course, deliberately trying to imprint a hero onto you, the reader. But the key words we've had out of Mother, Muad'Dib, grief, etc., which really just tell me, and it's drawing out the tension. And Jessica's response: grief is the price of victory. One of those absurd statements, isn't it? And Chani's thoughts again: is she preparing me for grief? I don't think that was the case, because if we look at it, Chani's the person that brought grief up here, but it's quite possible in her thoughts. Chani then says, there are so many women without men. There was jealousy when it was learned that I'd been summoned north. You caused a little bit of a problem down below. What's going on? And here we go. Jessica, I've written at the top of this page, this is Jessica and the Lieutenant's deception. I have written Iphigenia, and I've written all of a sudden, like Jessica says, I summoned you. And Chani felt her heart hammering, wanted to clasp her hands to her ears, faithful of what they might hear. Still, she kept her voice even, control. So this is the deception the deception that brings Iphigenia to Alice. This is the deception that brings Chani to the Cave of Birds. So the message was signed Muad'Dib, says Chani. I signed it thus, says Jessica, in the presence of his lieutenants. It was a subterfuge of necessity. And this is really important. And let me just catch up with your comments before I have a wee talk about this. So Jill said, my favorite chapter, she goes left because of this. Cynthia says, Chani is also the daughter of Liat Kynes, so her DNA already reflects both off-world and Fremen traits. Absolutely. Is this what makes her wild? I'm going to go with what Babs is saying. That's what I mean by wild. Cynthia is what Babs Tellios de Wiz is saying. Her use of wild is meaning outside of the sisterhood's breeding program. That's exactly. Wild is just someone that they don't know about, or someone that they can't control. They require tight control of important bloodlines. So it's much later, isn't it? In the later books that we find is the main character that's a wild Reverend Mother is Rebecca, I believe, isn't she a Jewish Reverend Mother? If I'm remembering, I'm fuzzy around those last couple of books. Can't wait to get reading them again, I suppose. We are, by the way, folks, once we finish this Dune book club, we are going to be pushing on with Frank Herbert's other 5 novels in the series. Hopefully what we'll try and do is manage it a bit better within the station. And what I'd like to do is something one week, book club the next week. Something one week, book club the next week. And I think it'll help me manage things a lot better. And yeah, just keep the flow of stuff going. But in particular, there's so much. I think once we hit the other books, there's so much more in them. I think, you know. Jessica had already had Paul outside of their control. Alia was an ordered birth. It's an attempt to fix the problem, I think, isn't it? Telly us the whiz, Babs. What do you think? That her having Alia is that she was supposed to have a daughter. And obviously she can choose the gender of the child. So she's had Paul deliberately. She deliberately chooses to have Alia as a girl because that's what was expected of her. And I suppose that if she, Alia would be supposed to be married to Harkonnen, wouldn't she? To create the Kwisatz Haderach if Paul had been Paula. Pardon me. So let me just say, I signed it thus the presence of his lieutenants. It was a subterfuge of necessity. This is one of the major themes of Dune. That those around the center of power have acted here against Paul's wishes, consequences. And that this is Paul's lieutenants, the Feda King, we have to assume, have come in and created a lie, a deception, and not only that, a deception against a fellow Fremen, if you like, against Chani. And it in terms of the overlay of the Trojan War, this is the deception against Clytemnestra to make her send her daughter to Alice. They tell her that her daughter is going to be married to Achilles. Of course, she's not. This is the reason, by the way, for the ultimately the familial violence that goes back to the Pelopids, but this is the thing that causes Clytemnestra to murder her husband when he comes home because he killed my daughter. And of course, the spiral of violence continues and continues. Which I always said, if this family were truly descended from the Atreides of the Trojan War, it's highly unlikely that the Atreides would get that far into the future with all the familial violence. Of course, Atreides is a real name, isn't it? Sayadina are outside the sisterhood by definition. Yes, I think so. It's their equivalent, the Reverend Mothers, but they're not Bene Gesserit, are they? Yes, Rebecca was a Jewish wild Reverend Mother. Thank you, telling us when she took the Horde in her other memory, she became Bene Gesserit Reverend Mother. God, it's been a long time since I've read the Bene Gesserit books. The least I quite enjoy them, but I'm keeping it all for the book club the next time. But I'm looking forward to it. It's one of those points, by the way, that people used to comment that there's no Judaism and Dune. It's a load of nonsense. It's right there. You know. So sorry, let me just get my wee bookmark or paperweight there. So we're getting to the crux of the thing, but here is a deceit. And as I said, this will have consequences. And simply put, that Paul wanted Chani in the south with Leto and Herat. Chani's not there to protect Leto. I think now it could have had a consequence. Things could have went differently. Who knows? But simply put, this will have consequences. And she's left her child behind to come here to help save her partner, but it's Jessica's child that will live, I suppose, if we look at it in those terms. So Jessica's thoughts here is, this is a brave woman, my pals. She holds to the niceties even when fear is almost overwhelming her. Yes, she may be the one we need now. And those words, we and need, have been underlined. And I again, just like to contrast that with the need to keep Stilgar, and we need, the need to maintain, if you like, Gurney. The Atreides need people to use, basically. Yeah. Tell us the Sayadina seems a Fremen term. I think so. Ryan the Scar says Harkonnen genes were less important than the genes of the Fremen. And Carlos Cresselia saying Alia was an abomination, but was she still genetically viable for the Bene Gesserit breeding program? I don't see why. Well, I don't know about that one. That's a good question, Carlos. Telios is saying, remember, Chani was Romulus, the Reverend Mother Romulus student. She's likely to have become Sayadina had Jessica not appeared. That's right. She's the next in line there, which answers a question, by the way, Babs, about the Five-Falush system. Why is Chani not the Imperial planetologist after the death of her father? And in terms of course, the Fremen aren't part of the Five-Falush system, but her father is an Imperial, an agent of the Imperium. And so it seems that the Five-Falush system does not work, I suppose, for women. And yes, Romulus, Reverend Mother Romulus student, that she will take the place. It's I suppose a role of inheritance and positions, if you like, but it's there's succession set up within Fremen society, but it's but absolutely bang on. She should have become the Sayadina had Jessica not turned up. And she's been trained in those, and we're going to see a little bit of that. There's definitely a touch of those abilities within Chani. We'll catch a hint of it here. And Ryan Scar saying the Sand tribe merging couldn't happen without the Fremen genes. That's an interesting point. Oh yeah, well, we're jumping ahead of a few books, aren't we? It's always nice to speculate, but I can't wait. Honestly, I can't wait to be doing this with the God Emperor of Dune. That's going to be nuts. I'll be quite happy in my element there. In all honesty, the two books that I prefer, and I think there's real meat in them, is Dune Messiah and God Emperor, and I think they're the two outstanding novels of the series. Dune itself's pretty good, but it gets fleshed out a lot more in the next two books. Where are we now? Yes. Her thoughts. This is a brave woman, my Pauls. My Pauls, by the way. So we talked a wee bit about possessive pronouns there. Chani's my Muad'Dib, etc. My Paul, but to Jessica, he's my Paul, which is kind of interesting, isn't it? They can share him, I suppose. She may be the one we need now. So Chani, with the slightest tone of resignation that crept into her voice, now you may, and I've written that's the first time she uses that word, say the thing that must be said. This is kind of silly, I think. You are needed here to help me revive Paul. And Jessica's thoughts are there. So getting a wee bit of insight. The language is being carefully picked here. Very carefully. Chani's being careful of her words and thinking that Jessica's put up, but Jessica's actually being quite careful with hers as well. And it's just waiting for, I think that there's a bit of kainos here. She's waiting for the right moment to say this and present it in the right way. So you're needed here to help me revive Paul. So revive kind of means to live again, doesn't it? Jessica's thoughts are there. I've said it precisely the correct way. Revive. Thus she knows Paul is alive and knows there is peril. All in the same word. And that's economy of language, isn't it? And Chani takes a moment to calm herself. Again, the same word here. What is it I may do? So that's as if, what I may do is as if I have your permission. Is that? And again, Chani is being subservient here to get the truth out of Jessica. And once the truth comes out, we'll see a shift. In fact, it's pretty much coming now. What is it I may do? This is followed with she wanted to leap at Jessica, shake her and scream her, and take me to him with a big exclamation mark. But that's what's going on in her mind, and I love the contrast of that. But she waited silently for an answer. What is it I may do? And Jessica's suspicion is what we get next. We're going to get a little bit of the truth, but it's not correct. She's misjudged the situation. I suspect the Harkonnens have managed to send an agent among us to poison Paul. It's the only explanation that seems to fit. A most unusual poison. I've examined his blood in the most subtle ways without detecting it. And there's little things about this that make it kind of question, the fact that Jessica can't pick this up in this chapter, and I wonder why. And is it just simply that there's so much turmoil? Maybe the attack of Gurney has flustered her a bit. She doesn't come across as flustered here. And she has been, as we'll find out, been at this for 3 weeks, trying all sorts of things. But she suspects that the Harkonnens have managed to send an agent among us to poison Paul. It's the only explanation, not true, that seems to fit. A most unusual poison. I've examined his blood in the most subtle ways without detecting it. Chani, at this point, thrust forward onto her knees. Poison. Is he in pain? Could I? And she's interrupted. He's unconscious. The processes of his life are so low that they can be detected only with the most refined techniques. I shudder to think what could have happened had I not been the one to discover him. He appears dead to the untrained eye. And Chani's little remark here is you have reasons other than courtesy for summoning me. I know you, Reverend Mother. What is it you think I may do that you cannot? And that's the third time Chani uses the word may. And Chani's language, I have all of these highlighted here. Her responses are quite short throughout this book. They're often a single line if you take a look at almost all of them. Real economy of language with Chani, whereas Jessica's waffling a fair bit, dodging the issue. We're getting a little bit of explanation, a little bit of exposition from her here. But Chani's bang on here. And I've been, you've reasons other than courtesy. So you should have summoned me out of common courtesy is what she's saying there. It's taken her 3 weeks to do so. Reverend Mother. Formal title. What is it you think I may do that you cannot? And Jessica's thoughts are here. She is brave, lovely, and so perceptive. Yes, she is. More maybe than Jessica gives her credit for. She'd make a fine Bene Gesserit. And I just put in brackets, really? Question mark. And it's that Bene Gesserit thinking, is it? Jessica says here, Chani, you may find this difficult to believe, but I do not know precisely why I sent for you. It was an instinct, a basic intuition. The thought came unbidden, send for Chani. And Chani, for the first time, we're told, saw sadness in Jessica's expression, the unveiled pain, modifying the inward stare. Second time we hear that in this chapter, the inward stare. Oh, right, I'm coming up for air, folks. And I'll check your comments. Let's see. Oh, right, hang on. I've got to back up a wee bit. Oh, where were we? Let's see. Tyson, that's a good one. Maybe she had no desire to become a planetologist and he's okay with it. I don't think we'll ever know. But it really is interesting. And tell you, Bob saying, was a new planetologist sent by Shaddam after Liat dies? Likely not. No indication. There's not one doesn't turn up with the Emperor, does he? It is interesting. When we get to the first appendix, the desire of Pardo to have a male son, isn't it? That he can really get his ecological plan going to manipulate the Fremen. Once we're through, Jim, we're going to hit Appendix 1. It's a short story set in the past, and it really does show how Pardo Kynes turns up on this planet and manipulates the hell out of the Fremen, up to the point of marrying and producing a son. And the sun, the marrying into the Fremen, is a major part of his ecological dream. And it's the same, I think, with Liet. Liet's married with Fremen wife, etc. And again, maybe he's had a daughter, but I would get the sense that I suppose that all of the Fremen are involved in that now, but you would still get the sense that it's good to have someone communicating with the Emperor, etc. The Emperor's, but I don't know. The idea of the Imperial ecologist or the planetologist, of course, is a good one, but it doesn't just quite line up. And I kind of go with it's the Faufoolish system, that it's male orientated, as far as I can tell. And of course, the only person who really that we know of that steps outside of that is Gurney Halleck. And the Fremen aren't part of it, but they're, I suppose they're, it's interesting. And you'd assume, Babs, that every planet in the Imperium must have a planetologist. The scholar says, because of the innate connection to Shaitan. Well, give us a wee bit. Oh, hang on, I'm backing up. The soundtrack we're putting up with the Fremen genes. Give us a wee bit more context there, Ryan. I've had to back up. I've lost track of that bit of conversation. Lord Croc saying, because Paul only consumed one drop of the water, maybe too small to detect for Lady Jessica. I think that's the way the text goes with it, that he's taken one droplet and that it's in his mouth, a single drop, and therefore he hasn't let it go into, it's transfixed there in his mouth. I think it hasn't entered into his bloodstream, which is interesting. Cynthia saying, Babs, perhaps the feud between Harkonnens and Atreides overwhelmed the Imperial interest in scientific investigation on Arrakis, thus disrupting the role succession of the planetologist. It's a good point, Cynthia, but there's something about something in the past within Dune that of course, Arrakis is a place of scientific interest, isn't it, within the Imperium? That's what the botanical testing station, as we call it, the botanical testing station period is there, and it's all shut down real quick, probably because of the worms, etc., and the melange. Perhaps the feud between the overwhelmed the Imperial interest in scientific investigation on Arrakis, thus disrupting the role of succession of the planetologist. I'd say with the nonsense going on Arrakis, as we'll call it, the brouhaha between the Fremen and the Harkonnen, that it probably does have a lot of people worried, and their thoughts just really turn towards maintaining their supply of melange. There's Souppot saying hi, y'all. Hi, Souppot. Thanks very much for joining us. Yeah, lots of questions. So it's an instinct, an intuition, not, it would also seem to be commonsensical, I think. Ooh. So Chani, but again, this change here, for the first time saw sadness in Jessica's expression, the unveiled pain modifying the inward stare. Have to ask yourselves the question: is how much of that's deliberate? Is it a genuine? And I think we know that Jessica's sad, and but to show her sadness and her pain, this woman can control her emotions and how it appears on her face. Is it a deliberate softening to let Chani see this, or is it Chani being able to penetrate the wall, if you like, that Jessica's put up, that she can see through that to the sadness in her expression? It's just a be curious thing. And we have this modifying this inward stares the second time we hear this. So Jessica tells us that I've done all I know to do. That all. It is so far beyond what is usually supposed as all that you would find difficulty imagining it. Yet, I failed. And there's hyperbole there. It's as much as I'm just amazing before, yet I failed. It's beyond, that's just hyperbolic waffle right there. All we needed Jessica to say is, I've done everything I know to do, but it's all failed. But it's so far beyond what is usually supposed as all that you would find difficulty imagining it. Anybody who ever, well, it depends on, I suppose, some people don't have this ability, but anybody who tells me I wouldn't be able to imagine something is deeply wrong. No idea how my imagination works, but I can imagine pretty much just about anything. And I think it's a little insulting, a little condescending here, but maybe it's an attempt to save face. I don't know. You could get quite a few different things out of Jessica here in this chapter, but I think it's what was it Frank Red said earlier, that we are seeing a real shift in the attitudes and relationships between these two women. And it's a little thing that's it's done subtly here, but it's coming. So here comes Chani again. Chani's like a detective here, isn't she? And again, the language, short, curt, to the point. The old companion, Halleck. Is it possible he's a traitor? And of course, we've all got a wee bit of an inner smile about that one. Jessica's not Gurney. And I've just put, no way. And the follow-on from that is that the two words, not Gurney, carried an entire conversation. Of course, we're party to that, I suppose, but Chani isn't. Chani saw the searching, the tests, the memories of old failures that went into this flat denial. Chani rocked back on her feet, stood up, smoothed her desert-stained robes. Take me to him. And this is, I love Chani. This is Chani taking control. And she's been subservient here to a point to find out what's happened to her man. Now she knows. Move, take me there. It's it's an economy of language. It's an order. It's kind of language that I would use when someone, I need you to do this now, quick. It's emergency talk, if you like. Take me to him. And Jessica arose and threw the hangings on the left of the wall. Off they go. He's just next door, basically. And Chani followed. There's no kind of annoyance with Jessica here with this order, if you like. But we'll see a bit of that throughout this chapter. But it's abandoned, doesn't it? Chani found herself in what had been a storeroom. The rock walls concealed beneath heavy draperies, and Paul lay on a field pad. Again, that's a Holtzman field against the far wall. There's a single glow globe above that illuminated his face, and the black robe covered him to the chest. Arms outside stretched along his sides, and he appeared to be unclothed under the robe. The skin exposed looked waxen, rigid. Hang on. I've written something here and I haven't finished my thoughts on it. I better have a wee look here and go to the book. No visible is what I've got, but there was no visible movement to him. I better write that in. I must have got distracted. All right, bear with me a wee second, folks. 23, no visible movement to him. There we go. Right. Now, we're told Chani suppressed the desire to dash forward and throw herself across him. She found her thoughts, instead going to her son, Leto. And she realized in this instant that Jessica had faced such a moment. Her man, threatened by death, forced in her own mind to consider what might be done to save a young son. And I've just got this. This is going to be huge irony later. Massive. She will lose her son here while Jessica saves hers. That's the point. And they both look to their children here. And this bond of commonality, if you like. And it is a shift in the two women's behavior. We'll see. Chani can come across. I think Chani can come across not as very hard here, but absolutely businesslike. What do I need to do to save my man? And I get the sense that she's quite miffed at being. There's a lot of waffle here before she gets to the man to see what's going on. But instead, her thoughts are going to Leto. Our thoughts will go to Leto next chapter, folks. And I said, definitely pay attention to this. There's a lot happening here that's subtle, but it's a massive. If we know what happens in the next chapter, there's huge irony here, and it's sad. It really is. If we contemplate what Chani does here and the consequences and what happens, it is a sad moment. The realization, we're told, formed a sudden bond. There we are, with the older woman. So that Chani reached out and clasped Jessica's hand. So again, the hand's always a motif within this book. The answering grip was painful in its intensity. Jessica says, "He lives, I can assure you, he lives. But the thread of his life is so thin, it could easily escape detection. There are some among the leaders already muttering that the mother speaks and not the Reverend Mother, that my son is truly dead, and I do not want to give up his water to the tribe." And I've just put next to this in red, Jessica is in real trouble here, politically and possibly religiously. If you say he's the Messiah, this is a living God, this is a Messiah, this kind of thing, and he trips over a stone and bashes his brains out, for example, then the person who's made this God, who's been taking all this power, is suddenly in great bother. The Man Who Would Be King is a great sort of story for that. And if anybody's not ever read the book, it's a Rudyard Kipling story. Goodness, I haven't looked at that in decades. There's a great film, The Man Who Would Be King. There's a very good film. It's Sean Connery and Michael Caine, if I can remember correctly. It's a great movie. Let's catch up with your wee comments. There's Frank just at the bottom saying, "I've got to go early tonight also, so thanks, Docs. Thanks all." No worries, Frank. Take it easy and all the best, and thanks as always for your comments and for joining us. Let's just back up a wee bit here, folks. Let's see. Because Paul only consumed one drop of Babs. Perhaps the feud between Harkonnens and Atreides overwhelmed the imperial interest in scientific investigation of Arrakis, thus disrupting the role succession of the planet. Sorry, I've reread that. Oh, Babs is also saying, "Gotta go, y'all. Have a good night." All the best, Babs, and thank you very much for joining us. Gotta go early tonight also. Thanks, Doc. No worries, folks. Take it easy. And as always, thank you for your comments and input. This wouldn't be half the thing it is without you. So take it easy, folks. And I like that. Thank you, Frank. Good night to you. So yeah, this is basically it is Jessica's in real bother here, and you can imagine that regardless of the missionary protectiva can go wrong. He's not the Messiah. He's a very naughty boy. That kind of thing. The Fremen leaders are starting to say that the mother speaks, not the Reverend Mother. That she's not there's a couple of suggestions I think you could take that she's not acting for the benefit of the tribe, perhaps here. Muttering that the mother speaks. She's in a position of danger here. That he's truly dead, and I do not want to give up his water to the tribe. That's one thing. If he is truly dead, that has massive consequences for Jessica that I would imagine might be fatal. Chani, again, how long has he been this way? And she disengaged her hand from Jessica's and moved further into the room. So here we go. We catch up with the time. I've made a wee note at the start of the chapter. This is 3 weeks later. So 3 weeks. Pardon me. I spent almost a week trying to revive him. There were meetings, arguments, investigations. Then I sent for you. The Fedaykin obey my orders, else I might not have been able to delay that. And she wet her lips with her tongue, watching Chani cross the hall. So she's not cut off there. She just breaks off her own thoughts. So if it wasn't for the Fedaykin obeying her orders, it's possible that the tribe would have taken Paul's water. It's slightly reminiscent of things of like catalepsy and stuff like that, that people getting buried alive and so on and so forth. Wets her lips with her tongue, watching Chani across the pot. So Chani's point of view here, she's standing over Paul now, looking down the soft beard of youth that framed his face, tracing with her eyes the high brow line, the strong nose, the shuttered eyes, features so peaceful in their rigid repose. And we're just getting a little description of the Atreides Harkonnen features there, I think. So here we go. This is Chani's investigative mode, if you like. All of Chani's speech, pretty much, is almost in this entire chapter, apart from a little bit, but up to this point, single lines. So how does he take nourishment? It's a good question. I can tell you that if you've been bedbound for 3 weeks like that it's not pretty. If you've been in a coma like that, there's all sorts of things happen to the body. The demands of the flesh are so slight that he does not yet need food. I just went, okay. What is it that they generally go with? Is it 3 hours, 3 days, 3 weeks, something like that? That you can live 3 hours without shelter, 3 days without water, 3 weeks without food. Of course, this country has proved that people can go way past that. I'll be talking about hunger strikes actually way in the past, but he's at the point where his body would be suffering, I think. But he is of course not a normal person. So there's no. How does he take nourishment? The demands of the flesh are so slight he does not yet need food. Okay. How many know of what's happened? And we're told only his closest advisors, a few of the leaders, the Feda King, and of course whoever administered the poison. We know different, of course. Seems quite a number of people. And we'll get the sense that, I don't know about you folks when you've read this chapter, but we're going to see this in a wee minute with Othium again, aren't we? There's not much privacy in a Fremen siege, or even a rest over place like the Cave of Birds. So the idea that only his closest advisors, maybe it's, I don't know, Feda King. He is a Feda King, I suppose. But I would imagine that a bit of gossip would have gotten out, particularly because of the religious awe that these people hold Paul in. But we'll find out. Oh, we're going right there now. There's no clue to the poisoner. And Jessica says, and it's not for want of investigating. What do the Feda Kings say? And here we go. They believe Paul is in a sacred trance, gathering his holy powers before the final battle. This is a thought I've cultivated, and I've just written, suckers. But this thought that Jessica's cultivated, you could argue that it's true. He is in a sacred trance, if you like. He gathering his powers before the final battle. This is a thought that I've cultivated. It happens to be correct. But again, what you're seeing here is the manipulation of the Fremen by an Atreides. And Chani's party to it, I suppose now. I wonder what she thinks of it. So Chani, we're told, lowered herself to her knees beside the bed, bent close to Paul's face, sensed an immediate difference in the air about his face. But was only the spice, the ubiquitous spice. The odor permeated everything in Fremen life, but still. So that, what she's sensing, it's just the spice. Or is it? So we get a very, very telling little. This is the next two sort of little things from Chani are almost as much as she says in this chapter in one go. And I have to consider that this comes on the back of Jessica just telling her that I've manipulated the Feda King. It's a thought that I've cultivated. I have manipulated your own people. Chani's response to this: you were not born to the spice as we were. That's a statement. You're not Fremen. Basically, you were not born to the spice as we were. It's an interesting comment back. Have you investigated the possibility that his body has rebelled against too much spice in his diet? And we're told that Jessica replies, allergy reactions are all negative. And I've actually put a question here. Allergic, fair enough, but as opposed to overdose. Why is nobody asked, has he overdosed? Has he taken too much spice? I suppose the question comes, can you overdose on spice? And I'd imagine that you could absorb too much of anything would be fatal, really, wouldn't it? So, but it's a comment here, and of course, Paul's not a Fremen, Jessica's not a Fremen, but it's a particular statement, I think. Jessica's response: allergy reactions are all negative. So we're going through the process here, trying to figure out what's wrong. Chani's notes just the smell of spice, ubiquitous spice. Jessica's thoughts here are that she's closed her eyes as much to blot out the scene as because of the sudden realization of fatigue. Which again, if she's not quite thinking right, fatigue. Yeah, we'll chat a wee bit about this later. Actually, I'm a person who's had to experience an outrageous amount of fatigue, and have to keep going. I've had to do it twice in my life, to the point where I was completely almost insane. Had time to call for help, if you see what I mean. Dealing with fatigue can be quite bad, and it depends on how far you go into it. But oddly enough, about last year, I did a month of virtually less than 4 hours a day, 2 hours, maybe 3 hours of sleep a day if I'm lucky, and it had a massive, a really bad cumulative effect, and I'm aware of it. So I was letting my doctor know that I am getting more and more fatigued, and I'm going to be making bad decisions sooner or later in relation to caring for my father. And there's a point where you're so tired that you're a risk to someone else. Does that make sense? That if I'm supplying somebody with their medicine or something, if I'm so tired that I can't think anymore, and that point arrived actually for me, and I had to call for help, which was my wife, and all I really needed was one night's good sleep. If you see what I mean. Well, I needed it a lot more than that. But fatigue is a thing that really, really messes with you. And how long have I been without sleep? Too long. And I just thought, that's her not thinking straight. And it kind of gives us an answer to why hasn't she been able to figure this out, I think. But Chani's response here is also a bit suggestive that it's you're not Fremen. When you change the water of life, Chani says, you do it with yourself by the inward awareness. Have you used this awareness to test his blood? And Jessica replies, oh, hang on, where's my... I haven't coloured this wee bit of text here, or this wee bit of conversation. Sorry, folks, just do that. Makes everything a lot easier when we come back to these notes. So her response here is normal Fremen blood, completely adapted to the diet and life here. You're not Fremen, your son's not Fremen. Her response is it's normal Fremen blood. It's not. And again, is that down to... It's an interesting statement from Jessica. I don't know what you think, guys. Normal Fremen blood. He's not Fremen. But, I suppose, do they see themselves as Fremen here? But he's completely adapted to the diet and life here. So that's more of a suggestion that he hasn't had some kind of response, an allergic response to it, if you like. Let's see. Cynthia's, yes, thank you, Cynthia. You can Alia overdosed deliberately and had to have her stomach pumped. Children of Dune, I think. Thank you very much. Yes, too much of anything can be fatal, can't it? It falls down to the great wisdom that you'll find at the Oracle of Delphi. Nothing in excess, everything in moderation. And know thyself, of course. Sigma. But nothing in excess means, everything in moderation. That's the way I always took it. That if you moderate what you do, you can enjoy most things in life without harming yourself. But too much of anything is a bad thing, I think. And it can be anything. Too much of anything could be just, I don't know. It can be make your life stagnant. It can be stop you from moving on to other things, from looking at different aspects of your life, trying different things, focusing on one thing so much. Particularly if it's drug abuse or something like that, it can be so damaging, not just to yourself, but to everybody around you. Oh dear, goodness, I'm doing a lot of talking. I'm going to come up, I'm going to have a wee sip of my lemonade here. But that's a really good point, yes. And of course, the idea is that, I suppose with melange, again, most drugs you need more and more and more. Paul's been taking more and more. Maybe the quote, says Lord Crunk, at the start of the chapter was Jessica's doing then. Well, is that the epigraph you're talking about? That's Princess Irulan. We always have to consider that Princess Irulan is writing these as part of the royal household, or the imperial household later on. And of course, I do like to point out every epigraph is propaganda. It's Atreides propaganda. And Irulan, of course, would be at that point is Irulan Atreides, isn't she? She's married to Paul, in name only, but she's a member of that family. And it's a talent of the heart of the Carinos, isn't it? That they make good historians or propagandists, if you like. And it brings back something that I always like to point out to people is that history is fluid, if you like, but history is a personal inquiry into something. The word historia is the Greek word to inquire. So history isn't what happened in the past, it's someone's inquiry into what happened in the past, and depending on how good a historian you are, how much evidence you can bring to the party, and how little bias or so the good historians work on a scale of the more evidence the better, the less bias the better, to the point where a historian should not have any bias. And it's a bit like myself approaching this work. There's some people who do approach work but bring their biases to it. And sometimes these are the things that make us want to investigate something. And I've always pointed out that I have loads of biases, but I leave them out of my work. You'll hear them. You'll hear my bias when I chat to you. If you know, it generally is about Northern Ireland, but that's okay. I'm from here, if you like. But yeah, it's an interesting thing. So it's a deceptive statement. It's not true. But he's got normal Fremen blood. I think we could take that as someone who's lived as a Fremen. There would be a level of saturation of spice in their blood, like that all the Fremen would have. And I think that's what that statement is. He completely adapted to the diet and life here. So he has adapted. So again, the movements of Chani are quite interesting. On her knees, standing up. Here she sits back on her heels. And again, submerging her fears in thought as she studied Paul's face. She has a level of control here that seems to be slightly beyond Jessica's. And I think it's maybe she's arriving at the problem fresh, and the Reverend Mother, Jessica's very tired, possibly. This is interesting. Submerging her fears and thoughts as she studied Paul's face. And we're told this was a trick that she had learned from watching the Reverend Mothers. And I think as Cynthia was pointing out earlier, that she's kind of was, I suppose, next in line to Ramallo. If Jessica hadn't come along, she's involved in the rites of the Sayadina and that kind of thing. But this is a trick the word trick, again, is interesting here. She had learned from watching the Reverend Mothers. Time could be made to serve the mind. One concentrated the entire attention. And presently, Chani said, "Is there a maker here?" Insightful. Jessica's response is, "There are several," with a touch of weariness. "We are never without them these days. Each victory requires its blessing, each ceremony before a raid." Seat orgies, basically. But Chani says, "But Paul Muad'Dib has held himself aloof from these ceremonies." This is the kind of sharing that the Fremen do, isn't it? It's through the seat orgy. And Jessica nodded to herself, remembering her son's ambivalent feelings towards the spice drug and the prescient awareness it precipitated. In this case, precipitate, I think it's a play on words, but in Latin that means to move headlong. The prescient awareness that headlong, yeah. So Jessica, a little bit of this is where I've written at the top of this page here. At this point, Chani takes charge. So Jessica says, just backing up there, "But Paul Muad'Dib has held himself aloof from the ceremonies. He's not participated in the seat orgies. Neither does Jessica." But Jessica says, "How do you know this?" "It is spoken." And again, Jessica says, "Too much is spoken." And that's said bitterly. And that's what we were talking about earlier, just who knows about this. Probably everybody. Or I'd say a fair amount of the Fremen might know about this at this time. Privacy doesn't seem to be a big part of their culture. Chani's, "Get me the raw water of the maker." And that's another command. And Jessica, again, stiffened at the tone of command in Chani's voice. And then observed intense concentration in the younger woman at once. So she's put her bullshit aside, if you excuse my French. It's, you almost get a "don't you tell me what to do" here. Get the raw water of the maker. Go. It's when people kind of do take control of situations like that, their language can be very direct, and if someone knows what they're doing and you do what they ask you, you can, situations like this can often be alleviated, I suppose. It depends on if a person knows what they're doing. There are many poor leaders in the world. You shouldn't always follow, I suppose, and this book is a good example of that, I suppose. Jessica stiffened at that tone of command in Chani's voice, but it is command at once. So she's putting her own loftiness, if you like, her own snobbery aside. They're working together, but she's happily taking the subservient role here now. Chani's taking in charge, which is a direct reverse of what we've seen up until now. Chani's being, what may I do? The use of the word may is like asking for permission up until now to get what she needs to know about her lover, her partner, the father of her son, Paul. And now that she knows what's going on, she's taking control, and Jessica's assuming she's happy to obey at this point. Stefan, not used to being told what to do, I suppose. At once, and Jessica, we're told, went through the hangings to send for a waterman. Another little bit of Fremen life there, person in charge of the water. So Chani's point of view, she sat staring at Paul, and her thoughts are, if he's trying to do this, and it's the sort of thing he might try. She's got a suspicion here. She's running with it. Jessica, we're told, knelt beside Chani, holding out a plain camp ewer. Ewer is an old-fashioned word for a pitcher or a jug. The charged odor of the poison was sharp in Chani's nostrils, and she dipped a finger in the fluid, held her finger close to Paul's nose, and the skin on the bridge of his nose wrinkled slightly, showing that the nostrils flared. And Jessica gasped. So this is an obvious sign that he's still alive, which would have done a lot to assuage the fears of the elders, for example. Well, that's direct evidence that he is alive. Goodness gracious. Jessica gasped. Chani, we're told, touched the damp finger to Paul's upper lips, and he drew in a long, sobbing breath. Jessica said, "What is this?" That's a demand. Chani responds, "Be still. You must convert a small amount of the sacred water quickly." And again, the urgency in the language, it's really good here. Chani really does take charge. Jessica, without questioning, there we go. The roles have been flipped because she recognized the tone of awareness in Chani's voice. It's that kind of order when someone knows what to do, if you understand. Jessica lifted the ewer to her mouth and drew in a small sip. And at this point, Paul's eyes flew open, stared upward at Chani, and Paul says, "It is not necessary for her to change the water." His voice is weak but steady, we're told. I guess get this, as Jessica's already got a sip of this fluid on her tongue and found her body rallying, converting the poison automatically. In light elevation ceremony, always imparted, she sensed, hang on, I better read that again. Converting the poison automatically. Where are we? Sorry, my notes are a bit crappy here. My bad handwriting is failing me once again. Let's just read this from the book. Converting the poison almost automatically. In the light elevation, the ceremony always imparted. Oh no, that was okay. She sensed the life glow from Paul, a radiation there registering on her senses. And in that instant, she knew. "You drank the sacred water," Jessica blurts out. And Paul says, "One drop of it, so small. One drop." So Paul is back here. "How could you do such a foolish thing?" says Jessica. And that was the wee note that we made there. I think before Frank headed off there, I think he mentioned the other week about characters moving through archetypes, the Jungian archetypes of the collective unconscious. The fool is a major archetype, and we have. I've actually put fools. We've had Gurney, we've had Jessica, and now we've got Paul, all taking the role of the fool. And what I love here is the little touche response the burn, if you like, from Chani. But how could you do such a foolish thing? The response is, he's your son. And that's it's a bit cheeky. I've written touche, burn, funny, etc. Because Jessica glares at her, and it is funny. And it's a moment of humor from Chani. It's quite dark humor, I think, but it lightens the tension and lowers things a wee bit temporarily here, I think. Paul, we're told, with a rare smile, warm and full of understanding, this rare smile touched Paul's lips. Hear my beloved, listen to her mother. She knows. I think, how could you do such a foolish thing? You're a person who does foolish things, and so am I. She's got it right. She's bang on. Listen to her. Chani says, a thing that others can do, he must do. It's the Kwisatz Haderach. To be this universal super being, you've got to be able to, it's like if you can't make a cup of tea or something, you're not much use. How could you be a universal super being? This kind of thing. If it's said that a man can change this drop of water and become a male Kwisatz Haderach, of course, all have tried, all have died, but the women can do it. Of the Bene Gesserit. A thing that others can do, he must do. So he's done it. And Paul says, here we go. So we get a shift here. Really, the language, the conversation really goes much more between Paul and Jessica here. The two Atreides, if you like. So Paul says, when I had the drop in my mouth, when I felt it and smelled it, when I knew what it was doing to me, then I knew I could do the thing that you have done. Your Bene Gesserit proctors speak of the Kwisatz Haderach, but they cannot begin to guess the many places I have been. Pardon me. In the few minutes and he breaks off here, looking at Chani with a puzzled frown. A few minutes is what, in terms of time, is what's passed for Paul. Chani, and here we go. How did you get here? You're supposed to be ... Why are you here? And I have written here, this is a moment. Now, don't know if you agree with me, folks, here. Chani's not in the south, and the Thopters. The two things here. One is the Chani's not in the south. Two, the Thopters that have been sent to bring Chani here. These are the things that have gone against Paul. And I have written here that at this point, he knows. What does he know? Have you figured it out, folks? He knows what happens to it. He knows what will happen to his son at this point, I think. You're supposed, it's the ... the unfinished thought. Why are you here? Things have changed. There will be consequences if Paul has presence, and he has. We'll find out this is the case. I think this is the moment he knows his son's going to be sacrificed, and he will not change that. And because he has the ability to do so, and you must consider that, I think. It's one of the things that should make us, we'll not get there to the next chapter, but it should make us wary of Paul Atreides. Paul tries to push himself up onto his elbows, and Chani pressed him back gently. Please, my Uso. I feel so weak. His gaze darts around the room. How long have I been here? Jessica tells him, you've been 3 weeks in a coma, so deep that the spark of life seemed to have fled. But I took it just a moment ago, and a moment for you. 3 weeks of fear for me. It was only one drop, but I converted it. I changed the water of life. I want to point out something very quickly here, is that the difference in time, and it's got something, I'm going to read you something very shortly from Lord Dunsany. The nature of a human entering Elfland and returning. Time is different. This kind of thing. But you'll get what I'm going to talk about when we get there. Just a moment for you, 3 weeks for me. It was only one drop, but I converted it. I changed the water of life. He's done it. And at this point, he is the Kwisatz Haderach. I think this is the realization coming. Before Chani or Jessica could stop him, he dipped his hand into the ear they placed on the floor beside him, and he brought the dripping hand to his mouth. swallowed the palm cup liquid. Jessica screams, "Paul!" He grabbed her hand, faced her with a death's head grin, and he sent his awareness surging over her. Now, at this point, I have a question here. Is this a kind of mental rape? I've put sensual rape. That's the wrong word after that, and then I've written next to it, is it a kind of sensory rape? I wonder what you think, folks. Let's just read a little bit. The rapport was not as tender, not as sharing, not as encompassing as it had been with Alia and with the old Reverend Mother in the cavern. That's Ramallo. But it was a rapport. And I've written, see chapter 37 here. A sense sharing of the entire being. It shook her, weakened her. She cowered in her mind, fearful of him. Paul allowed this speech is similar to there's a speech later on in the God Emperor of Dune. It's the God Emperor talking to oh goodness gracious, I can't remember his name. Bear with me a second. What's his name? Oh, I can't remember. Hang on a second. It'll come to me, folks. Bear with me a second. In fact, I'm going to have to look this up because I'm having a memory failure here. Let's go. Bear with me a wee second, folks. Right. Nope. Where's my sci-fi station? Right, just opening up a wee folder here. I'm having a brain fart here. Right, bear with me. It's to do with the giving and the taking, isn't it? In fact, that's the speech we're about to get to in a minute. Oh, no, I am having a brain fart. Somebody can maybe help me out here. It's the Carino historian who writes the history for the God Emperor. I'm trying to remember his name. And I am not remembering it at all. Let me catch up on your comments a wee second, folks, and maybe give my brain a wee time to sort it out. I believe that Paul was repeatedly overdosed in Jacurutu. Is it Paul? Oh yeah, hang on. Goodness, it's been a while since I've read a chapter of Dune as well. Isn't it? It's not what they do to bloody hell, I'm having a right old hard time remembering stuff tonight. Paul was repeatedly overdosed in Jacurutu. I thought, but is that what also happens to Leto II? Maybe let's see. Cynthia's saying, forget which later volume, but Alia described the awakening experience in the womb as more terrifying than a rape. Thank you, Cynthia. For the scene in this chapter, I wonder, does Paul need to share with Jessica? Or is this a display of power over her, or a verification that she needs to report back to the Bene Gesserit? It's power. It is a moment of power, isn't it? Power and control. I mean, we'll run through it here. I'm trying to remember the historian. It's in Children of Dune, isn't it? It's. I was looking at the wrong book. Hang on. Right, let's have a wee look. It's the son of Princess Winchester, isn't it? Why can't I remember this guy's name? Farad'n. Sorry. There we go. Farad'n was the person I was thinking. There's a conversation between the god Ember and Farad'n later on that's very similar to what's about to come up. This is a display of power. It is certainly a display of power. It starts with fear and goes to terror. But here we go. See what you think about my tone of voice here. I would do this in a commanding voice, but it says aloud, "You speak of a place you cannot enter. This place which the Reverend Mothers cannot face, show it to me." That's an order I have written next there. And she shook her head, terrified by the very thought. "Show it to me," he commanded. "No," says Jessica, but she could not escape him. She closed her eyes and focused inward. She's retreating in. And of course, she is showing it to him. And this is the word, the phrase, it's the direction that is dark, this hyphenated phrase. Bear with me a wee second. I've written at the top here, the dimension that is dark. Have I made a wee mistake here? The direction that is dark. I've written down. I've written the wrong word there. I've been obsessing a bit about dimension theory lately. The direction that is dark. The darkness. That's how it's described. As far as the direction that is dark, the place that the Bene Gesserit cannot go. So here we go. Paul's consciousness flowed through and around her and into the darkness. She glimpsed the place dimly before her mind blanked itself. Away from the terror, without knowing why, her whole being trembled at what she'd seen. I've put a little bit of Oedipus and Jocasta here for I'm getting Oedipal things. A region where, now this is how it's described, a region where a wind blew and sparks glared, where rings of light expanded and contracted, where rows of tumescent white shapes flowed up, over and under and around the lights, driven by darkness and a wind out of nowhere. And I just wrote, nowhere's Erewhon. Interestingly enough, a wind out of nowhere, just for a little giggle. Erewhon, if you want, there's two anagrams of Erewhon, by the way. One is nowhere and the other one's here now, which is quite interesting. So Jessica presently opened her eyes and saw Paul staring up at her, but the terrible rapport was gone. She quieted her trembling and Paul released her hand. Again, hand motif throughout this chapter. It was as though some crutch had been removed. She staggered up and back, would have fallen, if not Chani jumped to support her. "Reverend Mother, what is wrong?" So this hasn't affected Chani, but this is, wow, what a wallop to Jessica here. Just backing up over that little bit here. Cannot escape him, closed her eyes. She retreats inward. It flows through her and around her into the, she glimpsed places dimly before. Her mind blanked itself away from the terror. Without knowing why, her whole body trembled at what she'd seen. It has a massive psychological and physiological effect on her. But it's interesting how David Lynch envisioned this, with the rippled circles and the hand and etc. I always thought was brilliant. I think his imagery within the film is superb, and particularly this scene. It's done a little bit differently in the film, isn't it? But it's just the point where he is. This is the moment, isn't it? In the David Lynch film, I love it. But it's a forceful act here. He is commanding. It's show me, no, show me. Your no's not good enough. I don't accept your no. She could not escape him. So it's interesting. As I said, I've put, is it a kind of mental rape? I wrote the word sensory, but sensory is the way I put it. Because we're described, it is normally described as a rapport, a sense sharing of the entire being. But it shook her, awakened her, cowed her mind, fearful. This is not what it's supposed to be. And of course, as far as I suppose we could take it from the Bene Gesserit point of view, that you've created the Kwisatz Haderach. Be careful what you wish for, because here it is. And it looks like she doesn't like it one bit. Not at this point, anyway. It's terrifying to her. Oh, this place, I suppose, but Paul is this place. Presently, she opened her eyes, saw Paul staring. The terrible rapport was gone. She quieted her trembling. He released her hand. It was this some crutch had been removed, staggered up and back, would have fallen if not Chani jumped to support her. Reverend Mother, what is wrong? So tired, so tired. And here's the Kwisatz Haderach, of course. Here, sit here, says Chani, and she helped Jessica to a cushion by the wall. So the relationship between these two women really does pivot in this chapter. Jessica's point of view, the strong young arms felt so good to Jessica. She clung to Chani. This chapter is the moment these two women come together. I think it's kind of important, especially when we get to the last sentence of Dune, the very last sentence. The relationship of these two women, mother and daughter-in-law, if you like. The strength of her here, it feels good to her. She clings to her. Chani's question here is, he has, in truth, seen the water of life. She disengaged herself from Jessica's grip, which is the second time she's done this as well. Jessica whispering, he has seen. Her mind still rolled and surged from contact. It was like stepping to solid land after weeks on a heaving sea. She sensed the old Reverend Mother within her and all the others, awakened and questioning. This is the women of the other memory. What was that? What happened? Where was that place? And Jessica's, again, her point, through it all, threaded the realization her son was the Kwisatz Haderach, the one who could be many places at once, by location. He was the fact out of the Bene Gesserit dream, and the fact gave her no peace. Has the Bene Gesserit dream become a nightmare? What happened? Chani demanded. This is to do with the ancient forces of give and take. Chani shook her head. So this is a particularly important speech, what we're getting here. Let me see. I will run through a few of your comments before we hit it. And this is the bit where I'm going to read you something from Lord Dunsany once I get through this. This is to do with the giving and taking. But these are ancient forces. Let me just get my wee paperweight set up right, and I'm going to get some fluids here and have a wee look at your comments, folks. And if anyone's got any questions, again, I don't know what people think in terms of what Paul does to his mother here. I wouldn't treat my mother like that. Not in a million years. Let's see. But yeah, a delay of power over a verification that she needed to report back to the Bene Gesserit. At this moment, do all the Bene Gesserit see him there? If you see what I mean. Carlos criticized and saying maybe it's a way to force her to test her own true loyalties. And Cynthia says, Carlos, Leto was given doses of spice involuntary at Jakarta, and he speculated that his father Paul had been given spice by the outlaws to control him. Maybe not overdose, but likely forced. That is that. Yes, indeed. I couldn't remember if they did it to Paul or if it was just Leto the Second. It's been a long time since I read. Well, I have to say, the last time I read all of the other Dune books was 2009, I think, 2010. So we've gone through Dune a couple of times in that time. I'm looking forward to reading the others, because Dune is the one that I've read the most. But I'm particularly fond of Dune Messiah. I can't wait to get to it, actually. It really brings a lot of this stuff into its own, doesn't it? Well, here we go, folks. This is the really important speech in Dune. There is a similar speech later, I think, from the God Emperor. I like reading these speeches. I think the Northern Irish accent works quite well for these kind of things. So there is each of us, and I just want, before we go any further, I want to make a statement that us is not male or female. It's simply all of us. So here we go. There is in each of us a force that takes, an ancient force that takes and an ancient force that gives. A man finds little difficulty facing that place within himself where the taking force dwells, but it is almost impossible for him to see into the giving force without changing into something other than a man. Pardon me. For a woman, the situation is reversed. Now, breaking that up, men, just very quickly before we go on, men to take is okay, but men to give, you're not a man, or it's almost impossible to remain a man. For women to take, hang on, I've written this the wrong way down. For women to give is okay, but for women to take, the situation is reversed, where it's almost impossible to remain a woman. If that's essentially what's being said there, I'll explain it in a wee minute or two. But essentially, it's a separation of the sexes here. Men take; they have this taking, this ancient force where they can take things. Women are much more giving, I suppose, is there. When women become the opposite of that, when women take, it's the suggestion is that you're reversed, that you become something other than a woman. If you're a man and you take, it's okay, but if you use the giving force without changing, without changing into something other than a man, for a woman, the situation is reversed. So I've just sort of put those down. So men to take is okay. For men to give is almost impossible. The suggestion is that you're not a man. For women to give is okay. For women to take is almost impossible, but not suggesting is that you're not a woman. Ha! Goodness, there's an interesting idea. Now, we will come back to that in a wee second. Jessica's point of view looked up. Chani was staring at her while listening to Paul. This is a lesson I've written in question mark underneath this. Do you understand me, Mother? And Jessica could only nod. These things are so ancient within us that they're ground into each separate cell of our bodies. We're shaped by such forces. You can say to yourself, yes, I see how such a thing may be. But when you look inward and confront the raw force of your own life, unshielded, you see your peril. You see that this could overwhelm you. The greatest peril to the giver is the force that takes. The greatest peril to the taker is the force that gives. It is as easy to be overwhelmed by giving as taking. And Jessica says, and you, my son, are you one who gives or are you one who takes? Which is a very insightful question. And Paul's response is, I am the fulcrum. I cannot give without taking, and I cannot take without, and he breaks off here, looking to the wall at his right. Something's happening to the wall on his right. We'll come back to that. I've often been asked about this, and I've actually said that I understand that this giving and taking thing very well. If anybody who has been a carer will get this. So I am a man who gives, and I have given too much of myself at a point. The people that I've cared for take, if you understand. And there's a balance there. And I didn't understand that the first time around. I ended up with my own health. After my mother died, my health went to hell. 6 months of caring for her. My dad last year, it was a month of intense caring for him. I had a bit more knowledge about it. I gave as much as I could. And in that sense, the person has to kind of take, if you understand the person being cared for, it can cause all sorts of problems, if you see what I mean. It changes relationships. And oddly enough, funny enough, I've talked to my wife about this, but as much as I am my parents' son, in later years, our relationship changed. As much as my parents were always my friends, I became their carer. I cared for my mother. I cared for my father. After my mother died, I was almost like a husband. No, a wife to my father. we were sort of, I tried to help us get his life back up and running and stuff, and tried to get him to do things. And our relationship, people used to call us things like, quite insultingly, people would sort of say we were like steptoe and son and stuff. And I tried to involve my father in my life to help him create a new one, you know. And so my relationship with my parents is, at a certain point in life, they were like my children, if you understand me, which is a strange thing. And so the giving and the taking, these ancient forces, I suppose that the idea is that women give a lot more. They're a lot more into giving. I don't know, we've talked a wee bit about caring and stuff like that before. It has consequences, but that's the way I look at it. In terms of when you're caring for someone who's dying, you can't go about it in a shitty way. Do you understand? If you're not going to do it right, you need to go away and get someone else to do it. You have to have the right temperament. You can't get angry or snap at people. Know that you're looking after, no matter how tired or wrecked or just sick to death of it, or how sad you are about it all. And so the giving and the taking is an interesting thing. If you're a carer, I suppose the point is that you will give and give and give, but you have to stop at some point and keep a part of yourself alive. It's the same for the person being cared for, that they're always taking, but there's a part of them that has to, still be a part of themselves, that they can't always take. Does that make sense? That they have to give something back to retain a sense of your own relationships and your humanity, I think, is the best way I could put that. Excuse me a wee second, folks. I'll be right. Ping. I think ads were running shortly there for some viewers. There we go. There we are. Right, let me just catch up with your comments. And I promised you I would read you something here at this point. Let's just run through that again. So there is an ancient force that takes and an ancient force that gives. A man finds little difficulty facing that place within himself where the taking force dwells, but it's almost impossible for him to see into the giving force without changing into something other than a man. For a woman, the situation is reversed. For men to take, it's okay, as I was pointing out, for men not to take. For men to get the giving force, if you like, the suggestion is that it's almost impossible to not turn into something other than a man. For women, the situation is reversed. Do you understand, Mother? These things are so ancient within us that they are ground into each separate cell of our bodies. We're shaped by such forces. You can say to yourself, yes, I see how such a thing may be. But when you look inward and confront the raw force of your own life unshielded, you see your peril. You see that this could overwhelm you. The greatest peril to the giver is the force that takes. The greatest peril to the taker is the force that gives. It's as easy to be overwhelmed by giving as the taking. And of course, and you, my son, are you the one who gives or takes? He says, I am the fulcrum. We'll have a wee chat about that. But this is we're having a wee chat about Lord Dunsany the other night, just when I popped on for a little bit of a chat. Would you actually believe just where I got to in my book? And I want to read you something from Lord Dunsany, just for a wee moment that's very relevant to this. Won't take too long. Where are we? For it is true that right, here we are. So, for it is true, and Alveric knew that just as the glamour that brightens much of our lives, especially in early years, comes from rumours that reaches from Elfland by various messengers, on whom be blessings and peace, so there returns from our fields to Elfland again to become a part of its mystery all manner of little memories that we have lost, and little devoted toys that were treasured once. And this is the part of the law of ebb and flow that science may trace in all things. Thus light grew the forest of coal, and the coal gave back light. Thus rivers fill the sea, and the sea sends back to the rivers. Thus all things give that receive, even death. And I thought that what a wonderful, that's a very similar little sentiment from the King of Elfland's daughter. That's on page 68 of the 67 to 68 of the edition I have, and I thought what a very elegant little thing there. But it just reminded me of reading this at the moment specifically, and I just thought the timing of it was a bit coincidental, if you know what I mean. I'm just going to catch up with your comments there a wee second, folks. I'll pour myself a little bit of lemonade. Let's see. Oh, Carlos was saying the historian in children was Ferran. I think it was, Carlos. My old memory needs a bit of work sometimes. There's that much crap in my head, so I have to get it filtered and sorted. And sometimes I have to get an output for it. Welcome back, says Ryan Scarrett. Thank you, Ryan. How are you keeping me? So I've been asked about this before, the giving and the taking. That's my personal take on it. And yeah, it's something I do understand, and I understand the peril of it. If you see what I mean, the greatest peril to the giver is the force that takes. Greatest peril to the taker is the force that gives. It's true. It is a truth. And you, my son, are you the one who gives or who takes? I'm the fulcrum, says Paul. I cannot give without taking, and I cannot take without. And he breaks off. So we had that use of the word crutch. Let me see. Let me just back up a wee second here. Going back to Jessica just a wee bit, we were told it was as though some crutch had been removed. Now, just to let you know, fulcrum, he is the fulcrum. So we can take that as something from physics, or we can take it as something from language, but the Latin verb fulcere means to prop up or support, like a crutch. Laughing out loud, I say. A crutch is what I put here, laughing out loud. Of course, within physics, it's the point a lever is placed against to get purchase, really, isn't it? So in Latin, fulcrum is actually the post of a couch. There you are. A little bit. Words are interesting, aren't they? So what we're told is that Chani felt a draft against her cheek and turned to see the hangings closed. There's been an eavesdropper, and I've written at the top of the page, it's Othium, the eavesdropper. And of course, Paul says it was Othium. He was listening. He is a Fada king, and he's been the Fada king who's led Chani down here. Chani, accepting the words, was touched by some of the prescience that haunted Paul. And this is really interesting. This is what we were talking about Chani earlier. That her abilities, her she really does come into her own in this chapter. She's the business here. She's figured it out. She's direct to the point. She commands where she needs to. She manipulates Jessica, I think, in a way here that works quite well. And I think Jessica and her various Bene Gesserit tricks, I get the sense that Chani's wise to some of them, and she uses the word trick when referring to a Bene Gesserit technique. Accepting the words, we're told she was touched by some of the prescience that haunted Paul. Good genes if we're thinking about Leto II, the God Emperor. And we're told that she knew a thing yet to be, as though it had occurred. And Othium would speak of what he'd seen and heard. Others would spread the story until it was fire over the land. Interesting metaphor there. Spread like fire across the land. So it brings me back to that, what we were told earlier. Who knows about this? Just a few people. That contradicts that kind of thing, doesn't it? And even this is Othium is one of the Fada king. He's going to go out and speak of this. It's a gossip, and he's not going to keep it quiet, is he? And that's Chani. She knew of this thing yet to be. He would speak of what he'd seen and heard. He won't keep it private. Others will spread the story until it's fire over the land. Paul Muad'Dib is not as other men, they would say. There can be no more doubt. He is a man, yet he sees through to the water of life in the way of a Reverend Mother. He is indeed the Lisan al-Gaib. Jessica says here, you have seen the future, Paul. Will you say what you've seen? Not the future. I've seen the now. And he forced himself to a sitting position and waved Chani aside as she moved to help him. The space above Arrakis is filled with the ships of the guild. And Jessica trembled at the certainty in his voice. The Padishah Emperor himself is there. And he looked at the rock ceiling of his cell with his favourite truthsayer and 5 legions of Sardaukar. The old Baron Vladimir Harkonnen is there with Thufir Hawat beside him and 7 ships with every conscript he could muster. Every great house has its raider above us waiting. We're getting they're all turning up here. And Chani shook her head, unable to look away from Paul. His strangeness, tone of voice, the way he looked through her, filled her with awe. And Jessica, trying to swallow dry throat, said, for what are they waiting? Excuse me, my throat's gone a bit dry. And Paul looked at her. For the guild's permission to land, the guild will strand on Arrakis any force that lands without permission. And Jessica says, the guild is protecting us. Protecting us, says Paul. Excuse me. The guild itself calls this by, I'll put 1, spreading tales about what we do here, and 2, by reducing troop transport forces to a point where even the poorest houses are up there now waiting to loot us. So they've dropped the price on transport, and pretty much we have the greater houses of the Landsraad, the lesser houses of the Landsraad. The Harkonnens are up there, the Emperor's there, the Bene Gesserit are represented. Every great house has raiders, and even Thufir Hawat's there, and lots of Sardaukar. The whole universe has turned up, pretty much to see what's going on. Jessica noted the lack of bitterness in his tone and wondered at it. She couldn't doubt his words. The same intensity she'd seen in him as the night he revealed the path of the future taken them among the Fremen. And so here we get the plan. So Paul takes a deep breath. Oh, as we call it from Cynthia, I'll take a wee deep breath. I'll take a wee breath myself. We're heading towards the end of the chapter. It now seems clear that Paul needed this experience sharing with Jessica in order to flesh out the truth of his being a fulcrum. Is he now both male, female, now both father and mother? That's a very interesting point. I believe so. There's is he now both male and female? This is a big part of the religion of Dune, isn't it? And he can see into the female line, the male line, now both father and mother. It's a very interesting way of putting it. You're very much reminding me on Merlin, Cynthia, or is it Excalibur? Are you the mother and the father of the baby Merlin? Do you remember this from Excalibur? I think so. There's something about the male and the female, and particularly if you look at the religion of Dune. Whenever we get there, the Great Mother, for example, is the horned goddess, the feminine principle of space, commonly mother space, the feminine face of the male, female, neuter trinity, accepted as supreme being by many religions within the Imperium. And I'm wondering, is that kind of where, as what you're saying, he's male, female, male? I believe so, but I also believe he's neutral too, if you see what I mean. Yeah, it is quite an interesting thing. Yeah, it very much what you just said. It reminds me about Merlin being the mother and the father of the baby. There's Rolando Sada saying, "Howdy, Doc. Texas is blazing today. We're having insane. Oh, I hope everybody's okay in Texas. I mean, the weather is getting to some real extremes, isn't it? I hope everything's okay there, Rolando. We had the month that we just had here. I don't know if any of you know this, but the oldest weather station, as we talk about as far back as weather records go, it's in Northern Ireland. It's Armagh Planetarium. But we had the hottest summer last year. July was the hottest summer in Northern Ireland on record, and this July has been the wettest, and that's how can you actually believe, folks, that they're starting to say, there's some idiot, I think, put up stuff there recently. It's tourism that while your country's blazing, basically come to Northern Ireland, we're going to be fine. It's that kind of thing. It's something I've been pointing out to people for a long time, that Ireland is in a very particular place when it comes to, you know, the environmental changes that we're going to see over the next 100 years or so, you know. But regards to everybody in Texas, Rolando, and I hope you're all keeping well. Howdy, I like that. It's blazing today. How hot is it there, Rolando? You'd have to give it to me in centigrade, by the way. But the weather here is what we call hot cold at the minute. But it's just we're sitting sweating a bit but there's no heat or there's no sun. If you know, it's all, we've just got layers of cloud that aren't too high up, and the sun's up behind it, and we just got mist. We've got so many types of rain here at the minute. It's ridiculous. But yes, the world is fun. But I hope you're all keeping okay, Rolando. Let's see, where were we? Yeah, so as the guild is protecting, not a chance, no. They've caused all this. And I think the interesting point is that Jessica noted the lack of bitterness in his tone and wondered at it. That's an interesting little comment, you know. 42.4 centigrade. Good, that's hot. Cape Cod, Massachusetts, mildly muggy here. 42.1. There's places in Europe are hitting 50, Europe and America, and you know, also places hitting 50 degrees at the minute. You know, but we're not very good with the sun here. As you can tell, I often say I'm not white, I'm pale. And for you to understand that, you need to stick me next to a normal white person. If you see what I mean, you'll see how pale Irish people can be. Do not expect a sandworm. Very good. Out at night, stay inside during the day, Rolando, isn't that it? I don't know, I think we pushed 40, but not too close last year. But yeah, Northern Ireland's got a particular sort of weather. If you look at the oh, what was it they call it? The Atlantic Stream that's coming up here. It's kind of, we're just above it, and it's hitting, that weather pattern's heading into Europe. Hang on a second. Yeah, sort of the Gulf Stream comes up. We get, because particularly because I'm in the very north of Northern Ireland. If you actually take a look at it in terms of weather patterns, we get all sorts here. My wife comments that we've got really big sky here, but you can look out our house and try to figure out that you can sometimes see the wind. But it's which way is the wind coming from today? What weather pattern are we getting? You know, but make sure you hydrate well, guys, there, and keep those precious fluids in, keep them up. You know, get your water, maintain your water discipline. But do look after yourselves in the heat. I don't know. I used to not be able to take the heat at all, Rolando, but them being in Irish, I suppose summer used to kill me, and we used to hardly ever get any summer here at all. But I spent, when I was a student in London, the first summer I spent in London, I just melted. And London has the smog and all that, and it's like a big kind of greenhouse effect. And I worked at Heathrow as well. And the first year there, I just dripped and spent the whole summer rubbing ice lollies over my face and couldn't take it. And after that, I kind of got used to the heat. Which is the only sad thing is I used to be great in the cold, and now I'm not. Excuse me. Let's see. So here comes the plan. And actually, I was listening to Old Harry's game, the other day, and there's a mention of a plan, something like this, and it's basically very similar. That if you can't he can't control things, destroy it. And it's mentioned in Old Harry's game that this is a mindless philosophy as well. This is interesting. I don't know if anybody knows Old Harry's game, but it's one of the great audio dramas. There's the Hitchhiker's Guide, there's the Lord of the Rings, and there's Old Harry's game. And I would say that Old Harry's game is much, much better than the Hitchhiker's Guide to the Galaxy. It's a lot funnier. And if anybody hasn't checked it out, Andy Hamilton at his best as Satan. It's brilliant, very funny. And I consider it, it's humanism, isn't it? But I consider it science fiction. The jewel swine nature makes Paul the epitome of the park's self. That style of his nature, nature makes Paul the epitome of the park's self. There's a duality to it. I'm wondering, is there even more? But I'm not quite sure what you mean there, Rolando. Primal. Thank you. I think you must. Nature makes Paul the epitome of the primal self, style of his nature. Gotcha. Thank you. Typo. Thanks for clarifying. Yeah. Well, we're talking about primal forces here, aren't we? The raw forces that we're told all of us have of giving and taking. And so I found that wee quote. That's the page that I'd stopped on the other day. Of just a wonderful little coincidence. I was chatting about this book the other day, and I says I'm tearing through it, and I'm up to page 68. Just got it, and that little quote about it's the same sentiment, isn't it? The self is an interesting concept here. Let's have a wee look. Takes a deep breath. Here's the plan. Mother, you must change a quantity of the water for us. We need the catalyst. Chani, have a scout force sent out to find a pre-spice mass. If we plant a quantity of the water of life above a pre-spice mass, do you know what will happen? Jessica weighed his words and suddenly saw through to his meaning. Paul, she gasped. This is the water of death, as I've called it. There we go. I've done a wee. There we are. On my wee book. The skills, the water of death. Just heading to the conclusion. So, the water of death, it'd be a chain reaction. And we get that juxtaposition. Of course, Paul's taken the water of life, and now he's going to turn it into the water of death. A chain reaction. He pointed to the floor, spreading death among the little makers, killing a vector of the life cycle that includes the spice and the makers. Arrakis will become a true desolation without spice or maker. And I've put a whole pile of comments here. Right. is this genocide, deicide, ecocide, mundicide. You know, um, what he's proposing here. So genocide, the killing of a type, species, if you like. Deicide is the killing of your god. Ecocide is the killing of your environment or your household, if you want to take it that way. Mundicide is killing of a world. Side kide bit comes from the Latin cadere, which means to kill. And I've just written that's a whimsy by Ross. That's me. So, but I've just the implications of that. If we consider without spice or maker, and the maker is both Shai Hulud and Shaitan. To the Fremen, he is their god and their devil. It's a dualistic. The worms are a dualistic deity to the Fremen. And the response here, I suppose, but that's my own comment. Chani put a hand to her mouth, shocked to numb silence by the blasphemy pouring from Paul's lips. And I've just put the alliteration and consonants is nice in this. Shocked to numb silence by the blasphemy pouring from Paul's lips. There's a good bit of sibilance in there too, isn't there? He who can destroy a thing has the real control of it. We can destroy the spice. And I've written there, that's hydraulic despotism, also occasionally known as oriental despotism, which is one of those terms I think that people don't like anymore. Not that it bothers me. Archaic language is a fundamental part of my world. If you see it, I mean, people say you can't say these words anymore, etc., etc. I use them all the time. Generally because my head's in the ancient world a lot. He who can destroy a thing has the real control of it. We can destroy the spice. And Jessica's question here is, well, what stays the guild's hand? They're searching for me. Think of that. The finest guild navigators, men who can quest ahead through time to find the safest course for the fastest highliners. All of them seeking me and unable to find me. How they tremble. They know I have their secret here. Without the spice, they're blind. And Chani found her voice here. You said you see the now? And I'm wondering, is she wondering about Leto here? Paul lay back, that's the little comment I've written there. Paul lay back, searching the spread out presence, its limbs extended into the future and into the past, holding on to the awareness with difficulty as the spice illumination began to fade. Again, too much of the drugs use wears off. Go do as I commanded. The future's becoming as muddled for the guild as it is for me. The lines of vision are narrowing. Everything focuses here where the spice is, where they've dared not interfere before, because to interfere was to lose what they must have. But now they are desperate. All paths lead into darkness. And there we go. What a great wee ending for this chapter. Wow, we got there. He who can do so much in this chapter. And we are going to be, a lot of this will make sense, I suppose, when we get to the end of the next chapter, where we get my son is dead and Alia is captive hostage, and how little the universe knows about the nature of real cruelty. At the point where, as far as I'm concerned, and I think it's a valid thing, let me just get there very quickly. Chani, where he says, where he awakens, and he talks about him, and then he says, Chani, how did you get here? You're supposed to be, and he breaks off from that. Why are you here? From that point, as far as I'm concerned, what's happening in that, he's seen something there, I think. He knows his son, what's going to happen. And I think the next chapter is going to be very interesting in terms of the consequences. There really is a direct link. I think very much here, what's done to Chani here is the deception that's very similar, which is done to Clytemnestra in the Trojan War. The deception, it's simply a false message to get her child somewhere. Of course, Herbert's inverted that, isn't it? The false message has brought the mother. not the daughter. Or not, in this case, Leto would be the daughter, if you see what I mean. And as always, Frank does these wee inversions and things like this. But it's very much, if we know the Atreides, there are motifs here from the Trojan War and the story of the Atreides, and we're going to see it played out to its tragic consequences. It is one of the clues, as far as I'm concerned. There's Joseph saying, Heidi, I'll catch. Oh, what's that? Factor non-verbal says, I'm a Lange bong hit. That'll be curious. Joseph saying Heidi, Factor saying Heidi ho. We're just coming. We've just managed to get to the end of the chapter, guys. But I'll say, if anybody's got any questions about this, the real crux of it is that there's a lot of important stuff here. The water of life. The moment. This is the moment where Paul truly is the Kwisatz Haderach and something more. It's the realization of the dream of the Bene Gesserit is in this chapter, as we're told, and it gives Jessica no comfort. This is the result of all of this. Is the Kwisatz Haderach is a weapon. It's as simple as that, and their desire to be able to wield that weapon while standing behind it, I think, is ultimately what the Bene Gesserit have been up to. Be careful what you wish for is a major motif within Dune. Oddly enough, it's a major motif of the King of Elfland's daughter, which just to let you, there's a little bit of blurb here on the back. The King of Elfland's Daughter is one of the most beloved fantasy novels of our time, a masterpiece that influenced some of the greatest contemporary fantasists. The heartbreaking story of a marriage between a mortal man and an elf princess. It is a powerful tapestry of the fairy tale, asking what happens following happily ever after. Neil Gaiman's wee comment here is that The King of Elfland's Daughter is a book about magic, about the perils of inviting magic into your life, about the magic that can be found in the mundane world. It is a rich red wine which may come as a shock if all one has had so far has been cola. That's a bit crap, isn't it, Neil? But it's about people who invite magic into their lives and the regret. Careful what you wish for. I just thought that the wee quote there, that the wee passage we found in Lord Dunsany was particularly in relation to the giving and the taking, the ebb and the flow of life, as he put all things giving and receiving is the way he puts it. I just thought it was a very interesting little, just a sheer coincidence that we happened to be on that. Do you think he saw his son's death as inevitable at this point? I think it's a timeline, isn't it? It's a path, and the golden path is, and it's something that it has to happen, I believe, and we'll see that. And I hope the next chapter is not too big. We're at 46 will be the next one. We've got 46, 47, and then the final thing. So we'll see that in the next chapter. We can see it in his actions, that of inaction. I think that he won't move, he won't act, and there's even the Fremen, he's waiting for the death of Leto. And again, the wind, etc. If you know a bit about the myth, is that the gods have becalmed the Greek fleet at Aulis, the 1,000 ships, and there's no wind, and until Agamemnon sacrifices Iphigenia, the Greek fleet will not move to Troy. Once she's dead, the wind returns, and thus the war begins improper. The Trojan War is a wee bit more complicated than that, but fundamentally we do have at the core here the myth of Iphigenia. So I mean, you have to understand that there's a myth around this, and that the very least Atreus is these are historical people. To be completely honest with you, not everybody who's in the Iliad or the Odyssey is historical, but Odysseus is real for an absolute fact, and so is Agamemnon, and so are Menelaus. These people were real, and what the Iliad really is an overlay of myth onto history, if you like. If you can separate the gods' actions. Take the gods out of the Iliad, and you've got a fair idea of what's going on in the Trojan War, and archaeology backs it up, evidence backs it up, which is interesting, because about 170 years ago, people thought that Troy was a myth. excuse me. So I do. To me, that's the point, Carlos. As I mentioned it, and when I got that in my notes, I'll just show you. It's to me just because it's the way Frank runs with things from one chapter into the next. It's that overlay of the Trojan of the Atreides myth, the Pelopid myth, if you like, and that's I've just put a big red line right there. This is the moment. It's because he cuts off. What is she supposed to be? And she was told that she must stay in the south with Leto. Right at the beginning, I think there's little clues. And the things that Paul wouldn't do are the things that Jessica has done. He won't use a thopter. He won't bring Chani here. She's done both of those. Chani's thoughts there just at the beginning of the chapter. Why did he summon me? He told me before that I must remain in the south with Leto and Hera. Must. That's an imperative. That's the way I look at it. That's when he cuts off. That has changed. And I think the momentum is going. He is now the Kwisatz Haderach. And there's one direction really that he can go. I think that leads to the right outcome at this point. But the future is becoming as muddled for the guild as it is for me is the last part of this. The lines, there are lines of vision that are narrowing. Everything focuses here where the spice is, where they've dared not interfere before, because to interfere was to lose what they must have. But now they are desperate. All paths must lead into darkness. Interesting with Paul interfering with this here. He will lose what he has, in that he'll lose his son. And fundamentally, folks, we all love Paul Atreides, don't we? He is our hero. He's being imprinted on us. We buy into his myth. We'll struggle with it at points. But there are clues, as I like to point out. Herbert's put things in this book. We're being imprinted with this great hero. There are warnings all over this book. They're subtle. And you kind of have to ask, what would you do? And although you can't really put yourself in that position, it's how we understand. When we read a book and we invest ourselves in characters, it depends. Some of us just read the story for a good laugh. This entertainment. But if we look further into this thing, it particularly, I think it really does beggar a good, beggars a detailed look, especially when an author like Frank Herbert turns around to his audience and tells you what he did to you. I imprinted a hero on you, is what he says, on record. And when you understand that, the thing you have to ask is, how did you imprint this hero onto us? And we've been looking at this and analysing it as we go. And he is, many things about Paul are admirable. He is, as fact is saying he's a tragic hero, but he's a hero among heroes. He's the hero of heroes. And he is such an amalgamate of many types of hero. Babs have been chatting recently. Once we get the book club done, I'm looking forward to doing a few videos. And I thought, well, we'll do something on Dune, because I've done the three kind of things with the Pelopids, and I didn't think I ended it particularly well. And I thought that a good ending for that, I'll do a part 4, is right. I've said that here's this myth. Here are these let's bring up the characters one at a time and go, right, who is Leto? Who is Paul? Who is Jessica? But we're talking particularly about the influence of the character of Atalanta. From Greek mythology. Anybody doesn't know who, a lot of people don't know who Atalanta is. And she is the great female hero from Greek mythology. And she is the killer of the boar at the Caledonian hunt. She is an Argonaut, but they don't let her go. She's she's a very interesting character. There are a number of women from that part of, I suppose, both history and myth within the Greek world that Jessica is very much based on. I would add in that there's a little bit of Lady Macbeth in her, and a couple of other characters as well. And a little bit of Yocasta too, I think. But yeah, Paul is a tragic hero. I've got a wee clue. I don't know if you know this. The gods are fickle. They are indeed. I'll tell you what, sorry, I'm reading at the bottom here. I better go back up. Sorry, fact and Cynthia. I'll just catch to where we were. Carlos was saying, do you think he saw his son's death as inevitable at this point? I do believe that's the case. Fact and on Verba says then the Bene Gesserit wanted absolute control. Yes, and they got it without being able to wield it. Paul, his son, controls them enough to place them on the golden throne, on the golden path. Yeah, the idea is that I suppose that the Bene Gesserit are meant to be the power behind the throne. Put Paul on the throne, we control the throne. And that's not. They will cease to. They will not be the power behind the throne. The power of the throne is absolute. But we will get to see how people around. That's really what Dune Messiah does, and we got a little bit of it here with that. How people around the structures of power start messing with it and interfering with it, etc. Especially when there's an iconic religious character at the fore of it. But the lie that Jessica spends in this is done with the help of Paul's lieutenants, the people who are around him. And you're wondering, who's that? Is that Othim? Is that Corba? Quite possibly. And especially when we see how these men behave in Dune Messiah, Corba and Othim are very important in that book. They just seem like minor characters, bodyguards, Fremen Feda King here. But there's a lot more to them. And it's particularly interesting if we have read Dune Messiah, then if we read Dune again, you kind of note Othim and Corba, these guys, etc. So this is the chapter is bounded by desperation. First, the Harkonnen patrols Othim mentions, and the end, the Guild are desperate. Very good point. Well done, Cynthia. Yes, and it's you get. I don't know. It's also. There's desperation as well for Ravan, isn't there? It's the things are culminating. The Emperor's desperate, the Guild are desperate, everybody's here. And at the point where, we have to think, if the Guild are do at this point they know what he's up to? I think they do. There's enough people with prescient ability. But yes, the structures that congregate and form around a figure of power like this. Very good. Desperation. We'll get to your comment in a wee minute. Fact about Paul being tragic. Fact that the gods are fickle. Well, yeah, the Greek gods are evil, by the way. They're not good in any shape or form whatsoever. If you had to describe them, they're evil. In fact, if you know your Greek mythology, the gods are the bad guys. The good guy, as far as mankind is concerned, is a titan called Prometheus. And as far as I'm concerned, let me see. I think, isn't Prometheus the creator of man in Greek mythology? Supreme trickster and god of fire. Let's see. Let's go to Wikipedia and see what they have to say. Which is why he steals fire from the gods to give it to man, as far as I know. Some versions of the myth he's also created with the creation. Yes, some versions of the myth he's created with the creation of humanity from clay. He is known for his intelligence and for being a champion of mankind, sometimes presented as the father of Deucalion, the hero of the flood. Prometheus means forethought. His brothers are Epimetheus and Atlas. Epimetheus meaning afterthought. But within Greek mythology, it's interesting if you look at it in terms of Christianity, for example, the Prometheus is the adversary, which would be a Lucifer, a devil type character, if you like. Christianity invented the devil. He's a literary character, simple as that. The devil is not a Satan, for example. They're different things, and Lucifer is someone else altogether. And it's interesting how people bring different elements of etc. I'd say that Prometheus is almost the model for the Christian devil, if you like, but the gods are the bad guys and the adversary is our guy. Does that make sense? Prometheus would be the devil to Christians, if you like. He's the guy who supports mankind, who steals from the gods to help us, warns Pandora not to take the gift of the gods, etc., etc. Don't go Aleister Crowley on us. Oh, goodness. I know a wee bit about him. No, not at all. What is it he said? What was it in the 20th century? Do what thou wilt. Would that be it? I have a wee story about Aleister Crowley if you want to know. But I used to know someone who worked for him on his estate in Scotland, which is interesting. It's just the chap. I used to go out with a girl a long time who was French, a long time ago in my early 20s, and her sister lived up in Forres, which, if you know your Macbeth, on a heath near Forres in Scotland. And she married a chap, and his name, would you believe, is Damocles. And he has 6 brothers, and they're all named after mythological kings of Greece and Rome. But my understanding is his father was the groundskeeper for Aleister Crowley's estate. It might not be true. That's what he told us. He was an interesting guy. I won't say too much about him. Might get him into bother. Arrakis. Oh, let me just back up. The gods are fickle. Yes, indeed. Arrakis is a fulcrum. Oh, well, Aleister Crowley and all of that mysticism, it is a lot of hooey. That's all I've got to say about Aleister Crowley. Quite frankly, Red, you're interested in people like him when you're younger. You read up about them, but ultimately they're all just, I think, con men, to be honest with you. Paul is right now. Cynthia was saying Arrakis as a fulcrum with the desired spice. Paul is a fulcrum with his powers. Does the fulcrum attract forces of desperation? Part of the dynamic here. I think the whole universe is desperate here. Does the fulcrum attract? How did you put it? Forces of desperation. I am the fulcrum. I cannot give without taking. It's an interesting way of putting it, and I cannot take without what? We're not told what, but we should assume it's without giving. The fulcrum, to prop up, to support. The point of a lever is placed against to get purchase. It's an interesting way of thinking about it. Part of the dynamic here, everybody's desperate here. Yes, I think. And it's a moment of what Paul's plan is in terms of the hydraulic despotism thing, the environmentalist. It's a weapon of mutually assured destruction in this sense, isn't it? If you're addicted to spice, the one thing we do know is that spice withdrawal is fatal. If there's one place in the universe, if he destroys it all, and I think we get this, by the way, later with the god Ember, that his withholding of spice results in a lot of deaths, I think. So basically, if spice is a major commodity within the universe that everybody takes it up to, and including the Emperor, we're seeing a very old-looking Emperor in Denis Villeneuve's Dune. And I think it was just an attempt to sort of link up. Let's get Christopher Walken to play the Emperor. He's completely miscast, and I think it's just a wee bit of a Christopher Walken did the Fatboy Slim video weapon. Was it? If you the thing where he dances around it, was it? I can't remember the name of the song. Is it Weapon of Choice or something? Hang on, I'm sure you all know it. If you're all Dune fans, Fatboy Slim. Weapon of Choice, with Christopher Walken flying all over the place. And if you know the words to that song, if you walk without rhythm, you won't attract a worm. It's a very Dune song, isn't it? I think that's why Christopher Walken's been cast. For as simple as that, it's a nod. He's too old to play the Emperor. The Emperor should look young because he's a spice addict. He takes spice, and one of the effects of spice is it prevents aging. So the impact upon the universe of society, we have to, it would also, it's a big problem for the friend, but it's a mutually assured destruction thing. But the only problem is that he's the one. It's not like having nuclear weapons and then they've got nuclear weapons. And interesting that also, I suppose, that nuclear weapons aren't really considered weapons of mass or mutually assured destruction devices, MAD devices, if you like. Now, Paul is a tragic hero. In fact, no, his brother, don't go, Alistair, carry on, is that. I've a wee thing to let you know if about heroes. If we're talking about the classical heroes, the Greek of the Greek world, they're all tragic. In fact, almost all heroes are tragic. There's a wee bit in my PhD if you want to know what is a hero. And we use this word willy nilly these days. Everybody's a hero, but the hero is fundamentally associated with death. And if you look at all your heroes throughout the ages, you'll find this true. They're often a bridge between one thing and another. And Paul is in a sense like this as well. And we talk about Dune being a bridge itself. It's a major part of my PhD this is a bridge between the golden age and new wave science fiction. That's not intentional. It's Janus facing because of that. It looks back to certain fiction, looks forward to certain fiction. But the heroes that you know are all tragic. If you pick any one of them, Theseus, not good endings. My favorite one is Jason. Jason's an absolute shit. Excuse my French. If Jason marries Medea, has 2 children by her, then abandons her because her people don't want him to marry a foreigner, basically, and so he just casts them aside. And of course, if you know what happened, Medea is of course the daughter of the sun, so you don't treat her like that. And she slits her children's throats, and her father, I believe, is Helios, and he sends a chariot down for her, and she ascends to the heavens. And if you go further with that she is then married to Achilles in paradise, or the Greek heavens, if you like. But basically, what happens to Jason is he goes and sits next to the Argo, and just to paraphrase, basically goes, "Nobody loves me," and the ship falls on his head and kills him. And that's the end of Jason and the Argonauts. None of the Greek heroes end well. And they are fundamentally so. Hercules, for example, Heracles, sorry, is poisoned by his wife. She's tricked by it's a shirt of Nessus, isn't it? Is that what we call it? Nessus is the centaur. It's a shirt soaked in poison. He puts it on, and so that begins his apotheosis and death, if you like. But no, death and apotheosis. Sorry, but of course he goes, to Olympus, etc. He's a son of a god. But no, they're all tragic heroes within the Greek world. And I suppose the Greeks within literature look at all. It is a different way of looking at things. Almost everything within the Greek world in terms of literature is what we call poesis. Poetry really is a universal term, I think, and for all kinds of literature. But they're very much there's the tragic world and the comic world. Tragedy and comedy. If you study the classics, you'll spend a fair amount of time studying theatre. If you don't have to. Sorry, I'll rephrase that. There's that many things you can study in the classical world, but I particularly enjoyed Greek and Roman theatre, and I took as many courses I could on it. But yeah, Greek tragedy, Greek comedy, get the tragedy comedies in them, but the comedies are very funny. If you ever get a chance to go and see a play by an ancient Greek playwright, probably the one that is most common would be Lysistrata. It's still very, very popular. It's a sex comedy. But the tragedy, even King Arthur, take your myths. The only one I can think of that isn't tragic, and he's my favorite hero of all time, I'm sure you know, is Sun Wukong, the Monkey King. There's nothing tragic about him. He's just so full of life and fun. I know, but if you want the great hero for me of them all is the Monkey King, Sun Wukong, and you need to read The Journey to the West to understand what kind of a hero he is. Don't go with the TV series or the movies. The old TV series Monkey Magic would give you a fair idea of what a great guy the Monkey King is, but he's the best hero I can think of. So that's what I just had to say about Greek tragic heroes. Most of them are tragic. In fact, used to shave his back, I'm guessing. I think it was no. Fulcrum or a lever. However, as someone once observed, given the right lever, you can move a planet. Mm. So this is even Odysseus, who is able to go back home to Penelope, is doomed to wander again until he finds a place where his oar is not recognized. Utter isolation for the great voyager. Odysseus, hang on, is he not killed by his son? Of course, we've got Tennyson's poem, you know. I don't mean Telemachus. He has a son by, let's see. And I think this is lost, by the way. So it's, there's no, the end of, the great wanderer, Odysseus. Let's see, Odysseus. We have fragments of stuff from the Trojan, from these poems, if you see what I mean. Bear with me a wee second. Father's Laertes, mother Anticlea. That's a non-Homeric. Sisyphus was his true father. The rumor went that Laertes brought Odysseus from the conniving king. Odysseus is said to have a younger sister, Clymene, who went to Same to be married and is mentioned by swineherd Eumeneus, whom she grew up alongside in book 15 of the Odyssey. Now, there's before the Trojan War mythology. Let's go to during. Let's go after other stories. Cruel, deceitful Ulysses of the Romans. Yes, indeed. One man's hero is another man's villain. Journey home to Ithaca. Bear with me a wee second. I'm just running through Wikipedia here. But we need to get to the point where... Here we go. Let's see. According to some late sources, most of them purely genealogical, Odysseus had many other children besides Telemachus. Most such genealogies aim to link Odysseus with the foundation of many Italic cities. This is done with Heracles, by the way. The most famous being with Penelope Polyportes, born after Odysseus returned from Troy. Now, here we go. With Circes, Telegonus, Ardius, Latinus, also Ausonus and Cassiphone. Xenagros writes that Odysseus with Circe had three sons, Romus, Antaeus, and Ardaeus, who built three cities and called them after their own names. The city Romus founded was Rome. There's another myth for Rome. With Calypso, Nausithous, and Nausinous. With Chaldice, Polypoetes, and with Eupe, Euryalus, and with daughter of Thoas, Leontophonus. Now, he figures in the end story of the king Telephus of Mysia. Here we go. The supposed last poem in the epic cycle is called the Telegony, and is thought to tell the story of Odysseus' last voyage and of his death at the hands of Telegonus, his son with Circe. The poem, like the others of the cycle, is lost, and is that no authentic version has been discovered. That's what I was talking about. King Arthur as well, for example, killed by his own son, and he kills him, if you like. So that's what I was thinking on. Cynthia, you were thinking on Homer's writing, but there could be other versions. Odysseus spent too much time in Circe's embrace to be successful in his marriage. So, yeah, it's one of his failings, isn't it? I suppose. Because he is such an admirable Odysseus. If you have to admire somebody really in the classical world, it's generally him. The guy doesn't want to go to war and just wants to get back to his own Penelope, you know. But you know, yes, he's unfaithful to her. Now the women are sorcerers, aren't they? Sorceresses, so there's magic at work. So I don't know, but he's not faithful. Penelope is. I mean, Penelope's a very interesting character in the Iliad. Oh, sorry, in the Odyssey. Apologies. But yes, too much in Circe's embrace to be successful in his marriage. but it is a great story, isn't it? And somebody sort of said, I think a long time ago, somebody asked me, "Isn't that a happily ever after?" I went, "No, the Odyssey ends with an absolute slaughter fest, where the gods have to come in and go, whoa, it's just too much. Odysseus and Telemachus, just stop." It's one of those, which I always quite enjoy the end of the Odyssey. I do love the Odyssey and the Iliad, and as I'm sure you know, I have several different translations. I must show you one, actually. I've got something incredible here. It's a beautiful version of the Odyssey. Where would you? Right here. Hang on, have a look at this. Aye. The great translations of the Odyssey, if anybody's interested, as far as I'm concerned, E.V. Rue is very good. And I happen to have this, the Illustrated Odyssey, translated from Homer by E.V. Rue. If you look up who E.V. Rue is, he's the founder of Penguin Classics. One of my other favourite translations of the Odyssey, which you may find interesting, is by a guy called T.E. Shaw, who you might know as Lawrence of Arabia. And I wonder, I think it's one of my lost ones. I've got a translation here by Martin Hammond, for example. I've got an E.V. Rue. I did have his one, and I think it's lost. It's real sad. Yes, Lawrence of Arabia. T.E. Lawrence, also known as, I believe he translates, let me just check this, as T.E. Shaw. You know, watch Lawrence of Arabia. He goes by a few different names, doesn't he? Thomas Edward, there he is. I brought him up. I knew who I was talking about. There you go. Other names, does it say there? If you can find it, I had it. I must go get another one, but I like his translation. Yeah, Lawrence of Arabia is a translator of the Odyssey. Just to show you this, so this is the Odyssey. But what's so beautiful about it? Now, let me just give you this. I'll tell you about this book. It's translated from Homer by E.V. Rue. Introduction by Jacquetta Hawkes. This one, let me just give you the publishing thing, because if you could hunt this down, this is such. It's Book Club Associates London. This edition published by 1981 Book Club Associates by arrangement with the Rainbird Publishing Group Limited. First published Penguin Group Books Limited 1946. Illustrated edition first published in Great Britain in 1980 by Sidwich and Jackson Limited. Copyright of the estate of E.V. Rue. So that's the blurb there. Just to show you that this book is full of evidence, which I love. Vases, archaeological, you name it. This is full of stuff that will give you a visual understanding of the Odyssey, which is a great help. That's Odysseus with the sirens, and it's wonderful, and it has even nature photographs of, of the land, etc., of the environment that Odysseus would have passed through. Look at this. For anyone to read the Odyssey, just if you're not a classicist, stuff like this isn't necessarily easy for literary students would read it, etc. A book like this, really, particularly to someone like me, I just fell in love with this. And when I read this, I like to read this a lot. But really just to sit and look at the archaeology, the friezes, the weapons, armor, palaces, the geography, vases, the artwork, the whole world. There you go, folks. It's an exquisite book. Something I picked up by accident, but I saw E.V. Rue's name on it and just went, all right, that's for me. So I've got, who's that one there? I've got another translation. That's the Iliad. Who's that? Oxford. Robert Fitzgerald. That's not a bad one. In fact, that's probably the one that I'd worked from last. That's the Oxford World Classics. Well, that's the Iliad, sorry. But translators of the Iliad and the Odyssey. And of course, one of the really famous ones is by Pope, which you will hear poets write about. Upon reading Pope's Homer, it's not. I'm not a super fan of it, but there we go. Pope's Homer is both the Iliad and the Odyssey, and it's a much it's a poetic translation, if you like, and it's not too. It's a nice enough one, I suppose. I'm more into accurate translations. Um, oh, to be honest with you, but of course there is the poetry of the Iliad is a poem, for example, which a lot of people don't realize. And the Odyssey is written poetically, but it actually kind of reads as prose in a way, and you could argue it's close to probably being the world's first novel. But for anybody who wants to check out the Odyssey, that's an interesting little connection there with Lawrence of Arabia, who of course is one of the people that Paul Atreides is modeled on. Let me see. Even yes, thinking of Homer's ring, but there could be other versions. So the whole thing of the Iliad and the Odyssey, we've got the Homer. Oh, let's see. What have we got? We have a few other fragments. There is it the returns, etc. Let me just tell you a little bit about it. So much of this story is lost. And we've often talked about that. We talk about Dune being an unfinished book, unfinished by Frank Herbert. And I used to say I have no bother with books that are fragmented, unfinished. It's a big part of the ancient world. So the Iliad and the Odyssey, I suppose, are part of a much bigger epic cycle, most of which is lost. There's the Cypria, for example. And we even have little things like the Betrayal Myomachia, which is the war between the mice and frogs, which is a children's version attributed to Homer, pseudo-Homer, of the Iliad, which is, I'm hoping to do a wee audio version. I've got a copy, and it's rare. And generally, when you find it, you'll find it in German, or that kind of. It's not easy to get it in English. Yeah, Homer never. But just to let you know, Cynthia, Homer never wrote a word. He's blind and illiterate. But I know what you mean. He is the composer of the Iliad and the Odyssey. Is the best way to put it. In fact, remember, Odysseus spent much time in Circe's embrace. I like the old Greek maps. I love old Greek maps. I've walked around Rome with old maps. No bother. The overlay of the ancient upon the modern is very interesting. And I have old maps of Athens, and I've lent them to somebody. I think I've talked about this before. I've lent them to somebody, and again, they're there. Things are there. And overlay that map on top of a modern map, or just go there. You'll find these things. I find all sorts of things when I was in Rome, but I was using old material to find it, and I wasn't bothering to listen. I did listen to occasionally tour guides and stuff, and I listened to them get stuff very badly wrong. There we go, folks. Always a delight. It's interesting. I just thought we've brought a little bit of the King of Elfland's daughter into this today, and it's interesting because I often look at Chani in some ways like that. She's often described as elfin, isn't she? And yeah, I'm starting to see. I'm going to have to get through the King of Elfland's daughter because I'm starting to see some things in it. It's a highly influential book. I'd say without the King of Elfland's daughter, you'd have no Tolkien. You wouldn't have a Lord of the Rings. You wouldn't have a Gormenghast. These kind of things. It's massively influential on what we would call high fantasy, if you like. And if anybody's not had a go at it, by the way, it's a delight. So easy to read. Absolute delight. I'm loving it. But what a wee coincidence that we found that little passage there today. There we go, folks. Well, look, it's just gone midnight here. Look after yourselves, mind the weather, keep somebody tell me it's extremely hot, etc. Does anybody have any wee questions just before we go on? Before we head, I'll be happy to answer them. Otherwise, I'll get ready to say good night. I wonder what more will be lost to us after our next upcoming societal collapse. There's some really interesting stuff about the Bronze Age collapse, and there's a very, very good lecture on it. I'm trying to remember the gentleman's name, but well, if you what happens during a civilizational collapse is interesting. The Bronze Age collapse. Take a look at it. It's not what you think, but it's a fundamental shift in civilization. The result of it, though, is that, for example, that the Greeks lose the ability to read and write, really, as far as we can tell. Writing seems to be lost for a while. So you can date the siege of Troy. The Bronze Age collapse happens around it's the 12th century BC, so it's around 1170, something like that. I think is the estimates. BC, and it has a huge impact. And most likely that the Trojan War is a major factor in it. Wars, this is a war fought supposedly over 10 years. The idea that it's fought just in Troy is a misconception. And if you look at the coast of Turkey, for example, and find Troy up there, you have to understand that the Greeks were raiding and moving up and attacking all over that place. So it's Troy's where the focus of the Iliad is, I suppose. But it is a war that involves what you would call the west coast of modern day Turkey. Almost all the Greek city-states, for example, not really the state of city-states at that point, but almost all the Greeks are involved because of this alliance. And it in reality, it is an attempt probably to open up control to the east, trade routes, etc. There's economic reasons for it. And the whole Helen of Troy thing is the myth overlaid on top of it. What's the real reason? She's the excuse, if you see what I mean. Casus belli, isn't that it? What we call it, the cause of war, the reason for it. Those damn Ionians should just have submitted to Menelaus. Menelaus is a particularly interesting character. I don't know what to think about him sometimes. He's the one that you would ponder the most, and he's the one guy that seems to get out of the Trojan War okay. Though he has a hard time before and after it, doesn't he? But yeah, it's we're still not 100% sure what happened there, but it looks like there's migrations by the looks of it. Certain peoples move into the area. But one thing about the Bronze Age collapse that does let you know is that everybody's connected around the ancient world, around the Mediterranean, around the Greek states, etc. That they are trading with each other. Cultures move. It is interesting. And again, the more archaeological evidence that we uncover, the more we'll learn about it. But what will be more lost to us after our next upcoming societal collapse? Decency is already lost. I would maybe agree, but there's always individuals, isn't there, Ryan? I'm a misanthrope. As I'm sure I keep saying to you all, but you've got to have a bit of hope sometimes that there are decent people out there, and there are. You just have to look for them. I don't know. I think the whole COVID experience, for example, for the whole planet. I might be mistaken. Maybe other people don't think of it this way, but I think it made everyone in the whole world look at their own mortality, and how we deal with that. But I would say that the next civilizational collapse will be, if such a thing happens, the fact that we're all virtual, everything's on machines. We record our lives on a digital medium, and the lie that will last forever has been sold to a lot of people. It won't. Data decays. Everything decays in the universe. But particularly, how do I put it? Real things or artifacts that survive, throughout time, throughout history. It's more what the future generations lose, really, than us. I think it's the loss to the future that what they'll not know much about is if something happens to the World Wide Web, for example, it's quite possible someone could create an omniphagic virus, for example. I've thought about this. Just plant it on the web and go, copy, just consume all data and wipe it out. Wipe out the web. Eat it. Phage means to eat. What would we lose? We keep our photos, we keep memory, we keep all aspects of our lives, and it's all on the screen, etc., etc. You know, and as much as I do all this work, whenever I do this work, it's real. I don't do this on a machine. Does that make sense? I do my work here with a book and a pen, and when I'm finished, there's an artifact, a thing left that, you know, I don't know what to do with these books at some point. I might give them to someone, I might leave them to posterity. Who knows? Maybe get a bit, use them to make some videos. But it is interesting. The way I would put it is that how did I used to put it? The nature of how our society is ephemeral. That's the word I was looking for. And oh well, we do have stuff. We do have some tombstones. It depends on where you're from. Northern Ireland's a place that's a bit very focused on certain types of burial. That, for example, even in England, cremation, for example, things like that are much more, I think, is the most common form of burial now, but not here. People really, again, with both Christian communities in this country, really being kind of quite old-fashioned. But you know, a tree's got to die with you. You've got to be buried in a big box and stuck in the ground. And we still have plenty of tombstones and stuff like that. But these things. I love graveyards. If you're of the right mind, you know, things like this. We learn so much from them. But I think that the ephemeral nature of our record keeping, that's where the future. It's not what we lose; it's what the future will lose, I think. But you know, for example, if you're studying Romans, I could teach you how to very quickly. Could teach you what's called formulaic Latin factor, which tells you how to translate any Roman tomb. Something I learned a long time ago. Little things like Roman tombs, they have little things on indicators and stuff, and you can run through your things. See something like IOM on it, for example. A Roman soldier's tomb would indicate IOM. Jupiter Optimus Maximus is that, for example. Jupiter's greatest and best, dedication to the gods. But what we learn, I have what are called lactors, which are here's one. Ooh. There's a couple. I've got 4 of them, really. Again, it depends on what you study. Goodness, you want to see how much of a book, how much a book has been used for work? Take a look at that. That's from the early 1990s, obliterated with coffee stains, and these are evidence books. So if you study classics, for example, inside this are all the literary sources for Roman Britain. I love this in particular. These are the inscriptions of Roman Britain. And in the old days, you know, guys would go around with take rubbings and stuff. And these are built up to help people study. You know, if I want to study something about such and such a place, where's the evidence? They're in here. And you can see even a lot of these. This is the way these books work. So they cover particular periods of time. Lactors stand for the London Association of Classical Teachers. And there's a whole range of them. What have I got? I've got, from my period of study, I've got 1, 2, 4, and 11. So 4 and 11 are Roman because I covered Roman Britain for my thesis as a classicist. I did a study on Bath and Hadrian's Wall. All the evidence I need is in there, and then I've got because I was also focusing heavily on the Peloponnesian War. This is all the evidence from the end of the Peloponnesian War to the Battle of Isthmus, and then of course this one is the Athenian Empire, which is because we really do focus on the Athenians in the classical world. And again, quotations, passages, so it puts all of your evidence into one place. And I said there's loads of these. The classical world is a massive, massive, massive subject to study. An enormous fun. But evidence is great. That's how we work. Oh, there we go. Digital media. I've got. I'm a computer scientist, Ryan. I've have plenty of things on old media. I've got floppy disks, all sorts of things. It does not last. All things decay. Oh, there's my wee noodles over there. Let's see. Digital media won't last. Everyone I know, in fact, it says, who has died in the last 20 years have been turned to ash and constantly dumped in bodies of water all over America. In fact, this is I'm looking back to antiquity also. Yeah, I suppose. I mean, these methods of burial are quite. They're not environmentally friendly, are they? Funny enough, we were actually, me and my wife were talking about this, and said, wouldn't it be great to open a funeral parlour where we do what the Fremen do, get a huge machine press, squish the body down, and crush the bones and squirt into a liquid, and use it for fertilizer and something like that. You know, I don't know. But here, graves last 20 years. The interesting thing is that people think that regardless of who you are, if you think my grave is permanent, you're deluded. Time will go by, and the land that cemeteries are built upon, bodies are dug up, that kind of thing. It happens all the time. Ryan saying here, graves last 20 years. Where are you? Ryan's in Germany, I think, aren't you, Ryan? Very interesting. If you're about Amsterdam, if you visit the old Kirche. Myself, my wife, and son went there once upon a time. It was a good while back. I'd been in there before, but the bodies in there are stacked on top of each other. Space is a bit of a premium in there. And if you ever go in there, if you ever get a chance to go to Amsterdam, my own Tanlorn is what I like to put it. Get a chance. The old Kirche is a building that you can navigate around the city from. If you get lost, look for, that's heading towards the north of the city, and it's interesting that so there's a lot of, and again, the residents of the city, but your one grave is put upon another grave. This is the way they're buried in here, like this, vertically stacked, which is interesting. Amsterdam probably has floating tombs. Well, you'll find the odd person floating in the canals. The last time we were there in Amsterdam, well, we've been 3 times since COVID, but we were in Amsterdam when the city was shut for COVID. We had to figure a way out, etc. This kind of thing. But there was an English and Scottish stag party there, and they were being absolutely obnoxious. They were in the Chinatown. And the way they were behaving to the Chinese residents of Chinatown regarding COVID, they were coughing at them, this kind of thing. And they were getting, we noticed their behavior, and they were all quite drunk. But it was a stag party, and the groom disappeared. And the next day we were walking about the town, and there was posters all over the place looking for him, and he'd ended up on the flight home. We'd heard that he'd been found, and it was quite sad, but I think he'd ended up in the canal. No wedding, and I believe he was possibly the son of some reasonably famous footballer or something. I'm not 100% sure, but it was very sad. But we found that they found him on the way. We were on the plane. We'd heard that they'd found him, but there were flyers put up all over the city looking for him, and I think he'd fallen into the canal, something like that. I don't want to let the Tibet vultures up my corpse. Very cool. Well, the avian burial, isn't it? There are different the ways that we bury people. Avian burial is one. Put your body up high and let the birds pick at it. Is it the Native Americans and things like that would do that? It's not that uncommon. Burial at sea, cremation, burial in the ground, and there's a few different methods of burial, isn't there? But there we go. And it's interesting. What was it? There was also a thing about I visited Père Lachaise in Paris in my youth. Pardon me. And I think I've told you about that. I occasionally sort of I've been in bad things where I've had hyper awareness, and I was in a very bad car crash and was able to move before that. But I ended up being very sick in Paris because of it, and I ended up in hospital in about took me about 3-4 weeks to recover. And at the time, I wanted to get a bite to eat. We're just around the corner from Père Lachaise. So my ex-girlfriend at the time took me to see the cemetery there. And of course, we've got Jim Morrison, Oscar Wilde, Edith Piaf, Chopin. It's a very interesting cemetery to walk about. But there used to be this thing about, you can be evicted from Père Lachaise, if you see what I mean. I think there was so much prior to when I had been there, and at that time, there were so many people coming to see Jim Morrison's grave in particular and defacing it and stuff that was becoming a problem that I think that they were considering evicting him. This is weird, isn't it? There you go. About the residents killed the tourists. I don't know, but I wouldn't want to speculate on it. But the Dutch are very easygoing. I don't think they would have, to be honest. But by God, were they winding up the locals? It's a horrible thing to do. When you're abroad, behave yourself. That's what I like to do. Anywhere I go, if I go abroad, I try. If I can't speak the language, I learn how to say please and thank you, no matter what, in the language that the people speak. Just trying a little bit. And if you can learn to say, I'm sorry, I don't speak your language, do you speak? And that's enough to get you by. And please and thank you, are always good to know, I think, in any language. Anywhere you visit, it's just good to be, behave, I think. But no, Amsterdam's really cracking down on tourists again, and they're blaming the cannabis culture, but it's not the cannabis culture at all. That's just some bullshit that the politicians are trying to sell people. If you're there, it's raging alcoholism, and it's very much British drinkers. The English in particular are not well behaved in Amsterdam. They're not very well behaved towards other tourists either, I suppose. Is that like Zoroastrians you're thinking they're around? Fact is said, in Florida, cars rented by foreigners were meticulously hunted by criminals. Used to be a policy that showed when a non-citizen was driving a rental, it was to help the cops. Someone tried to mug me once in Amsterdam. So somebody's tried to mug me a couple of times. It did not go well for them. Someone said, give me your wallet, and I went, no, give me yours. And then I'll take your ears, and I ran. But I've also been punched once in the face. The two guys trying to kill a man in the street, and I had to stop them. And the guy punched me straight in the face like that. My chin's made of granite. You can punch me all day there, and I just go, and he punched me, and I just went, did you just punch me? And just ran. That was a British soldier and a son of a policeman beating up an English tourist just down the road, trying to kill him. They were trying to kick him in the head. They were repeatedly kicking him in the head over and over again. The person doing it is a person that works at the local university. But I've never been so appalled by two human beings in my life. If I hadn't stopped them, they would have murdered him in the street. But yeah. Someone tried to mug me once in Amsterdam. It's a friendly city, I think. Did you? I hope it did. It tried to mug. I'm assuming that you didn't get mugged. Hopefully, but there's all sorts of. You have to be careful there. But it's not the Dutch really that you have to worry about. The Dutch are very nice. I never like to generalize, but the people are very friendly. I've never had a bad experience of any kind, and even I've had two incidents where we've had to. Not been involved, but the police have come to help us in Amsterdam. And one where they've come to help, and one I've actually gone to ask for help, and they've been, yeah, sure thing. They're very friendly. And but yeah, it's changed a lot. I've been going there since 1995, I think, and I've been there almost every year because I'm supposed to be a quarter Dutch. But we don't really know. My grandfather is an unknown soldier, and we don't know really much about him, but we do think his name is Robert Frisch, and he was a Dutchman who emigrated to America prior to World War II. And then, as far as we know, he joined up with one of the regiments that was stationed in Northern Ireland. We're not sure, but that's it. He would be my grandfather, though I've never met him. My father never knew him. There's two stories about him. One was that he came back here after the war and he was driven out. And the other is that he was killed during the war on a ship with all hands dead. So who knows? I don't know. It's one of those things, isn't it? There you go. But it's not that bad, I suppose. But it's changing. Amsterdam has changed a lot. I like to say I was from New York also. Oh yeah. Also, I said I'm earlier screening people like us getting off the train. It was me and another 20-year-old student. If you want to know how to, what was it? The old thing. If you get hassle, they used to get these certain people that would type a hassle you in Amsterdam. And what they used to tell you, what I learned is that you just go niet. Pick up a bit of Russian. They think you're Russian. They won't bother you, and I don't know why, but I think they generally think you're a Russian sailor off the boat and you've got no money. That kind of thing. But I don't know what it was to do with it, but someone told me if you act like you're Russian, they'll go away and leave you alone. And hey man, you got any yet? Oh, okay. And it worked. It was interesting. But no, Amsterdam's a bit like a second home to me. And we go there because I suppose it's often we only take wee short holidays, and it's not too far from there, and we can land and we're totally familiar with the city, and we even have our own wee travel cards and stuff, Russian monsters are everywhere. It's funny how people look at people, isn't it? People are people. I don't know. Russia has often been presented as the great enemy, and people are people. I don't know. Their governments are something different altogether. But Russian mobsters, Irish mobsters, English. There's mobsters everywhere. This country is full of them, absolutely full of them. In fact, we had a very, very bad thing there. That there used to be a thing. They used to say never getting never getting a taxi in Belfast. In the old days of the Troubles, and somebody had put something up like that recently, and it really bothered the taxi drivers. But then we have footage. If you want to look at you'll probably find it on Twitter or something. It's a taxi driver with a Desert Eagle at a little kid's face, smacking him and demanding drug money and stuff like that. And that's Northern Ireland for you. So. Of course, it's not really the case, but there are these people are all over the place. That's funny because I used to teach in a prison. One of the things I used to say is that the amount of effort that they put into an illegal business. If you just put it into a legal business, you do the same work, that kind of thing. It's interesting the way people work, but I don't know. I lied and said I was from New York. Also, I had seen him earlier screening people like us getting off train. As being another 20-year-old student. Yeah, you'll get people that if you act like you don't belong, you'll attract certain people. If you pull out a map in the middle of the street, it's that kind of thing. And always get to your hotel and get rid of your luggage as quickly as possible. But that kind of thing. But there's enough of a drug culture in Amsterdam that you occasionally can attract the wrong type of people, the people that sell it on the streets, this kind of thing. But we had a guy come up to us the first time we were there. We were sitting on our suitcases outside this tourist office, and he just came up to us like that. I mean, the eyeballs, he was gone, and we were whoa. Just undercover Dutch cop just came out of nowhere and went, "Hey man," and just off he went. And the guy went, "Hey guys, you okay?" And he so it was interesting, I pretend to be from tough New York City. The Northern Irish have a reputation around the world as being mad terrorists. So it's a thing that you can you can play with a bit now and then. I don't like to do so, but it's just the Northern Irish people have a bit of a reputation, don't they? I just go no. Is it in the loudest voice? But I'm very good at voice control and stuff like that. And I am you wouldn't maybe know it looking at me, but the shoulders on me are incredibly broad. I'm a really big guy, and I'm quite intimidating. So to some people, you wouldn't think it, but I can take my happy face and just, go at you. Not that I would. I'm a completely non-violent person, but I would use language. And make myself big. I know how to make myself even bigger and move into people's space, and I can terrify them. So yeah, I'm not. I don't have any fear of that kind of stuff, and I'm not tough, but I'm highly assertive and can be incredibly aggressive if I wish to be, but I'm not violent. in any shape or form. But there you go, folks. Listen, we've had a wee bit of a natter. We've gone off as the end of the book club, and it was lovely chatting to you all. But it's 12:30 here, and especially last night. So I'm going to wrap things up for the night. The fact of saying this guy was bulging muscles, steroids for sure. I wouldn't do today what I tried then. Just walk past him and laughed. I don't know. Yeah, well, I would probably, I wouldn't pick a fight with something like that. But, it's just stand up for yourself. And generally, if you act like you won't, they seek out weakness and that kind of, just be confident, I think. But laughing at people is a good way. I think that's a good way of dealing with, hey man, give me your money. Give me yours. As a not that I want to mug someone, but just it usually somebody did try to mug me, and that's what I said to them. Hey man, give me your money. And I tend to broaden my Northern Irish accent. No, you give me yours. And also possible suggestion that you might start eating the people. I don't know. I like to create very bad scenarios in people's heads. I'll plant a worm in their minds and scare the hell out of them. It's much better than violence. I've never had to use violence in my adult life. I've been in many, many violent situations. My words will get me out of them. And the day that my words fail me is the day I'll probably get killed. But it hasn't happened yet. Listen, it's good. Always keep yourselves safe, folks. And interesting these stories. But Amsterdam can be a wee bit intimidating if you don't know it's as you get to know it. And if you're ever in bother there, just shout for help, because the people will help you. And that bulging muscle guy will run away. But there used to be undercover cops everywhere, to protect the tourists. Basically, that's what I was aware of it because I got to see one in action. But the cops are about, and they're very, very friendly, and just it's one of those places. It's a very open place. I think it's a bit different, but they are doing their best to shove the criminal element out, which is mainly in around the red light district. But it's more in with the sex industry than the cannabis industry, if you see what I mean. Pardon me. And I believe what they're wanting to do is get all the women out of those and create like a shopping center and put them all in it. Pardon me, which is quite bizarre. But in Amsterdam, you can find a prostitute next to a church. And I used to think, as it should be. Sorry, a bit rude. Listen, folks, I will say goodnight. Look after yourselves no matter where you are. We'll be getting on with chapter 40. Where are we at? 46 next. Another wee short one. I've already started the notes on it. We'll try and go for next week, but I can't promise anything. At the minute, if it's not next week, it'll be the second week. But we're pushing on, and hopefully, as soon as I have the work done, I'll announce for the closest Thursday to that. And we're really pushing to the end. I don't know what we're going to do with chapter 48 because it's 3 times longer than any other pretty much chapter. And that will be, but I'm going to do it in one episode. So we'll have to have that's going to be epic. Get your sandwiches and your thermoses, There's Bojack saying, hang on, I'll just run through your last comments and then I'll say goodnight, folks. Lord Crunks, thanks for the chats. Good night to you all. Dryland ecologists. Excellent. Bojack says, take care all. Ryan the Scar, have a good one, everybody. In fact, a good night, sweet dreams, Doc. Thank you very much. All of you, take care. Look after yourselves. Thank you so much for your input, as always. It's been a pleasure, and look forward to seeing you again real soon. Take care, folks. Good night. Ba-da-da-da-da-da-da. Do-do.